order the Ferguson Township Board of Supervisors regular meeting for Monday, May 15th, 2017. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, before we start with the agenda, I have a couple things I wanted to announce. The first is that, for the record, we had an executive session meeting on the personnel matter at 6:30 immediately prior to this meeting. The second thing I wanted to announce is that at our last meeting, we approved a motion to appoint Dave Perbolka as the township manager, subject to reaching satisfactory terms of employment. And I'm happy to announce we have reached those, and Dave will be starting as township manager on May the 26th. So. What's that? No. This is one.
Can you put your mic down, Steve?
Oh, yes. That'll help. Okay, the next item is citizens' input for anything that is not on the, or actually I'm going to announce one other thing before we start, is I know there are a number of people here interested in the climate change resolution, and it's pretty much at the end of our meeting, so if I have unanimous consent of the board, I would like to move that item to the beginning of new business, or the first item on new business instead of later on the agenda. So
Makes sense.
everybody's okay with that? Okay, we'll move that up to the number one on the new business then. So if there are any comments on items that are not on the agenda.
Could we, is this the time where we do we accept the agenda? Because I'd like to ask a request for something to be placed.
Oh,
and
if
the
you'd like to add
citizens
something to the
wouldn't know.
agenda, yeah, you can make a motion now.
Okay, great, thank you, Chair.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion that the board briefly discuss the official map that the Planning and Zoning Department have been working on today.
Okay. Is there a second? Or?
Second.
Okay. Yeah, I think we can do that. We need to keep it fairly brief and overview type because it hasn't been advertised, and I know there are a lot of people interested, but I would have no problem with adding that to new business. So any other discussion on that, or all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. So we will add that to the new business.
Thank you.
Okay. And so now we will go to citizens' input for anything that is not on the agenda, if there's anyone that cares to address the board. Okay, seeing none, we have a proclamation of the Township of Ferguson, Center County, Pennsylvania, designating the week of May 21st, 2017 as National Public Works Week. So Dave, did you?
Sure. The board has included with its agenda a copy of a proclamation, draft proclamation designating May 21st through the 27th as National Public Works Week. This is the second year that the board is asked to make such a designation. It's really just an honorary recognition of all the hard work that Dave Modricker and his crew do to maintain our streets and right-of-ways and township infrastructure. And I'm sure he can answer any questions if there are any.
Okay. Any discussion or?
Thank you, Public Works.
Yep. I guess actually we probably ought to read this as a proclamation if we're going to be voting on it. So, the proclamation is, whereas public works infrastructure, facilities, and services are of vital importance to the health, safety, and well-being of the people of this nation, and whereas such facilities and services could not be provided without the dedicated efforts of public works professionals, employees, and administrators representing all levels of government who are responsible for and must design, build, operate, and maintain the transportation, water supply, wastewater systems, public buildings, and other structures and facilities essential to serve our citizens. And whereas it is in the public interest for the citizens and civic leaders of this country to gain knowledge of and maintain a progressive interest in the public works needs and programs of their respective communities, now therefore the Ferguson Township Board of Supervisors does hereby designate the week of May 21st to 27th, 2017 as National Public Works Week, and urges all township residents to join with the Township Board of Supervisors in recognizing the substantial contributions Public Works personnel have made to our national health and welfare. Proclaim this 15th day of May 2017 by the Ferguson Township Board of Supervisors. Is there a motion?
I'd like to move that the Township of Ferguson proclaims the week of May 21st, 2017 as National Public Works Week.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? Motion carries. Next is the minutes of the May 2nd, 2017 Board of Supervisors regular meeting.
I move that we approve the May 2nd Board of Supervisors regular meeting minutes.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Laura?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I have a couple of points that I wondered about in the minutes. And, sorry, on page 2 of 7 under minutes, Mr. Miller called for a motion to accept the minutes with one amendment from Mr. Buckland. Is that all written properly, that paragraph there to describe the actions? I wasn't sure if it should have noted the amendment vote.
I think
It
that.
did.
Yeah, I
It
think
indicates
okay,
the
okay.
change and how the motion passed.
I thought it had to indicate the amendment vote and then the amended motion, and it only indicated the amended motion. But I was
Well,
addressing.
the change was, it's listed as a change, which I think is okay as long
Okay.
as it's recorded in here, what the change was.
Okay,
I
great,
think
thank
that's
you.
fine.
And then I wanted to, I have some concerns about where we just write discussion followed on page 3 of 7. I really want to say that I feel like some small synopsis of that discussion is really important to put into our minutes. Even just a sentence or two of the content. I know it says intermittent rentals and hazard trees sections, but I mean, I guess I would say that I would prefer that some of the dialogue about that be reflected generally in our minutes. So I'm not asking for a motion, but I would like you to consider that, Chair, in your,
Okay, we can.
in your decision-making about, what's available to the
Well,
public.
actually, the minutes are the responsibility of the manager.
Okay.
As the board secretary.
Okay.
So-
Right, so I think just to briefly address your question, I think we're still trying to kind of feel out what the right content is for the minutes, and so, we're trying to err on the side of caution and include things, I think Faith and I are trying to include things that we feel are relevant to the conversation, but discussions, particularly when they get broad-based and are covering a lot of ground, can be difficult, I think, to summarize in 1 or 2 sentences. We could certainly
Okay.
make an effort, that's no problem. And then if there's something that you feel that needs to be added that's not included, it can always
Okay.
be provided in the form of direction to staff at the following meeting prior to their approval.
Okay, so as opposed to in an email to you then, in the next meeting?
Well, I-
Just in working out our new pattern together, Dave? Just,
Right, so I mean, I think typically, by the time they are drafted and they get out to the supervisors for review,
right,
they're included in the agenda packet.
Gotcha.
So some kind of action then at the meeting
that
might be more
makes sense.
appropriate.
Thank you, thanks.
If I may reflect on the content of the minutes, it seems to be pretty comprehensive and includes amendments to the motion as well as the topics that were covered. So I guess I'm not quite certain what more one would include. So
Well,
maybe that therein lies the
Right,
difficulty.
I think that event essentially goes to Dave will submit them, and if there's something that's missing, we can add them by motion.
Yeah, I mean,
Thank you.
I think you'll find them kind of all over the place, depending on the body that's having them. I mean, even amongst this board, you've had comprehensive minutes, you've had short abbreviated minutes, something in between. So it's just a matter of finding out what is acceptable to the
Right.
board, and what level of detail you want.
Thank you. So for example, just when it says on page 6 of 7, discussion followed in detail on the elimination of message center type of lighting. A simple thing like, out of concern for the residential district adjacent to the IRD district, something like that, just so people understand what the nature of our concerns were and what we're dialoguing about. But, I mean, I'm really happy with the minutes, but I just wondered if just that nuance, so people can follow along with that dialogue. And then I just, this may be a de minimis, but in case it's not, it was in the motion on page 5 of 7, item number 4 in the motion. We have pet daycare facilities, and here it says faculties, and so
Okay,
that
we'll get
would
that corrected.
be, okay.
Official ordinance?
And that is it, thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion to accept the minutes with that text change. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None, motion carries. Next, we have, okay.
Reports?
Okay, now we get to the reports. We have the COG committee reports to start. The Joint Finance and Park Capital Committee.
I'll take that since I was present.
Thank you.
Okay.
I was unable to attend, and Ms. Winter.
Right. I did sit in for Rita Grafe at a special joint meeting with the Finance Committee, the CRPR Authority Board, Center Region Parks Recreation, and the Parks Capital Committee. We received a report from the Parks Director, Mrs. Solakongas, on the status of the Whitehall Road Regional Park. We heard from Mr. Gibbons regarding the options for the required parks loan. And as a result of much discussion, we were able to prepare a recommendation for proceeding with modifying the current loan agreement. So a motion was passed to recommend that COG recommend that the authority extend the current loan agreement with Fulton Bank until June 1st, 2018. And it's hoped by then we will have some more information on the litigation with Toll Brothers in the courts, because right now that's not set yet, as far as I know. Is that right?
No, I have one correction on
Oh,
that.
okay, one correction.
The extension goes for the life of the loan.
For the what?
For the life of the loan, which I
Oh,
believe was
okay.
2028 or something, but the
2018.
The recommendation of the motion was that COG reconsider the recommendation in a year, in 2018,
Okay,
and then reconsider whether we want to
to
want
reconsider.
yeah,
Okay, thank you.
continue the loan at that point.
Okay. And that was it.
Okay. Yeah, and I was also at that meeting as the finance
Yes.
representative. It did pass in both the Parks Capital and in the Finance Committee. There's a 3-2 vote
3 to
to
2.
recommend that motion. So it will go then to the COG General Forum next week for discussion and a vote by the General Forum. So,
Thank you, Steve.
Just confirming, Chair, that we are not permitted to ask any questions during the committee reports, correct?
that was, yeah, unless there's a specific clarification of something that was stated that, but it's not a time for discussion, is the point.
He was just correcting my. I didn't
And
want to
adding
get
the 3 to
motion
2,
wrong.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, next we have.
I'll take it
you've
again.
got the
Human Resources Committee. We met May 3rd, and there were many agency directors that were present to help justify some requests for personnel changes. We heard from the director of the library, Parks and Rec, Planning, Code, and Fire directors. And I was very impressed with the way it was handled. They actually each submitted color code. I love color code. And the recommendations were very well thought out and justified. So it made it a very easy meeting to go through all these recommendations for the human resources. We discussed the COLA, or cost of living allowance calculation. The different participating municipalities in the COG compute that different ways. So we looked at a comparison report of how COG and these different municipalities compute the COLA. We also looked into examples of COG personnel policies that need updating. The last time our policy handbook was updated was 1985. So we are sorely in need of updating. We are considering retaining the services of a legal professional to develop an entirely new policy handbook in 2018. More details of a lot of these changes, the COLA and COG policy, are in your agenda packet. And that's my report.
Thank you. And we have Public Services and Environmental.
Okay, so the Public Services and Environment Committee met on Thursday, May 4th, 2017. We discussed several items, including extension of UAJA sanitary sewer service to athletic field maintenance building, which we did agree to. We also, at the end of the meeting, had discussed something that Ms. Danini had raised regarding the organics recycling and the ability of people currently who are only here from time to time to opt out of certain portions of that. And so right now, the way that works is that they can opt out for spring and summer, but not the third. So for the first and second quarters of the year, but not the third and fourth. It's possible to revisit that policy, but for now, that's the way that it is. We also got a presentation from Erica Ely on renewable energy and looking at the possibility of an ordinance that could be used as a model ordinance across the region for solar. They will be looking at wind and geothermal later. Let's see. We discussed the Kinber fiber optic network. There have been some concerns, I guess, about the Kinber fiber optic network. Right now, though, the COG has renewed the contract with Comcast to August 2018, but we can withdraw from that contract with no termination fee. So Angel was there talking about this. There are some people, some folks who are interested in doing wireless right now as well. Let's see. There is a question that I think we may need to consider because of the CATA Ferguson hookup and the sharing there, so that's something for us to keep our eye on. We don't have anything imminent that we have to respond to for that. Like, we don't have to even discuss it now, but that's something that when Kinber folks come and visit, I believe in July, we can get a more up-to-date report from them. Then finally, and they will be, actually I should note, Kinber will likely be at the Public Services and Environment Committee meeting in July. So we will get an update at that time. Then finally, the planning agency, CRPA, proposed a change to what we had considered an AmeriCorps position. And so if you recall from last month, we had affirmed that COG should hire a sustainability coordinator through AmeriCorps. Now, Mr. May put forward an alternate idea late in the game. He suggested that we might consider basically combining two part-time positions. Currently, they are a staff assistant, a part-time staff assistant, and a part-time planner position. And there are monies there that, if combined and written as a full-time junior planner, some portion of that person's position, preferably a majority of their position, could be turned toward matters of sustainability. So there are trade-offs there, that being, instead of a full-time person, it would not be their entire position. However, you get the benefit of someone coming in as a junior planner who can work on these issues for a long time. It's a good career starting position. I myself was inclined toward supporting that. There was no formal vote on the matter, so that's something that we should think about and discuss perhaps in more depth at the early June meeting. Because what we asked Mr. May for is so that we can actually have, okay, what is this person really going to do? Is that how COG ought to be spending its money, et cetera, et cetera. So that concludes my report.
Thank you. And we have the Public Safety Committee.
Thank you, Chair Miller. The Public Safety Committee met on Tuesday, May 9th at noon at the COG General Forum, in the COG General Forum room. Just to hit the highlights, the agenda is in your agenda for this evening in the attachments. But in terms of covering, as I said, the highlights, under program plan proposals, something to note is that the code agency will be proposing the addition of a new staff member and moving an existing staff member from part-time to full-time. The new position we'll see this through HR then. Yes. The new position is a code services manager and will be primarily focused on proactively addressing customer service issues. The second personnel adjustment is to move the part-time staff assistant for existing structures from part-time to full-time to better support the field staff and provide better customer service. So you notice the theme is customer service, and it has been something that's been identified by both staff and folks that participate with COG as a high priority. In terms of emergency management, Sean Kaufman introduced his intern for the summer. His intern's name is Dia Johnson, and he will be working on a special project to identify gaps in service to vulnerable populations. And he gave one example of that as being folks that would need to have emergency information in other languages. And so, as you might imagine, in our community, that would be a need. And so that is the region's intern will be working on that project. Okay. And Steve Baer talked to us quite a bit about hazmat response in the center region, and I know that we talked about this just briefly in our previous meetings here. And Steve just wanted to let us know that the county and the COG views on hazmat management are out of sync. And he provided us with a handout of his recommendations of options to remedy this, and there were 5 options. So this was a handout provided at our meeting. I did not get this to you ahead of time, but I'll be happy to scan this in or give it to staff to scan and email to you. You'll hear more about this, and through our dialogue in the committee, we did take an action in regard to this. So in exploring these options, we need to be able to dialogue with the county. And we've reached out to the county several times, but they haven't reached back. So the action we took was to direct staff to prepare a letter to the county encouraging them to reach back to us to dialogue.
Yeah, if you could either get that to staff to send to us or.
Sure,
That'd be great.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. We had received moving on, next topic. We received an additional handout from Jim Steff about the Bellefonte Borough Code Services Agreement. Nothing to be alarmed about. We are moving forward with that, it appears. So that's great. Pointing out just one other item. Steve Bear also discussed, right now, I guess there's some dialogue in the region talking about as events ramp up that are out of the norm of what has been in the past in terms of our agreement of providing emergency service support, say to concerts, that kind of thing. The region has been talking with Penn State University about what the reimbursement might look like in terms of that. And discussions relating to payment for fire protection services for Penn State University Happy Valley Jam Country Western Music Concert on July 8th are going on. And he does note that the concert will include beer sales at concession stands and wine sales at premium areas, according to the Center Daily Times. And I just wanted to put a shout out to Penn State and say, when you are hosting these events that do have alcohol service and you are engaging with the region, if you can reach out to the emergency services before they learn details like this in the paper, it's probably going to be the best to prepare for those kinds of events. And then lastly, our next meeting will be June 13th. That's a Tuesday in the COG building at noon. Everybody is welcome. Public can attend. Thank you. No questions.
It's not on here, but the executive committee, I just wanted to let everybody know that that would normally be tomorrow at noon. If you show up at the COG building tomorrow at noon, you'll find voting booths. So the executive committee meeting has been rescheduled for Wednesday at noon at the College Township building. So if anyone's interested in that. Okay. Are there other regional committee reports? No? Then we have the staff report, starting with manager's report.
My report's in your packet, just a couple of brief items of note. Staff did receive some draft language from Clearwater Conservancy for the grant of the conservation easement for the area along Slab Cabin Run. This was a condition that the board placed on their contribution of $150,000 toward the Slab Cabin Run initiative. Staff, both at Ferguson Township and the other regional partners, are in the process of reviewing the easement language. Just a quick note that I'm in the process, our staff is currently in the process of trying to schedule a CIP road tour. If you haven't checked your email yet, there should be a doodle poll invitation. I think there might be some conflicts with that date from some of the board members, the dates that are provided, so I'm going to have to take a look at that and see if we can get something that everyone can agree on. Sometimes it's difficult to get five board members and staff to be able to come to agreement on a date and time for that. So we'll keep working at it. And then lastly, I'll be out of town at the Association of Pennsylvania Municipal Managers annual conference this Wednesday to Thursday.
Thank you. Let's see, the chief of police report.
Okay, my report's also in your packet. So for the month of April, for both our crime calls and our other calls for service, there's not much change from April of 2016, nor is there in the year-to-date statistics. Other items of note, we did get our official award of the grant application for to assist us in completing accreditation that came from the state through the county. We successfully completed our mock assessment on April 25th, and we're scheduled for the full assessment on May 23rd, so hopefully the next meeting will have some good news there. Also, the HOPE Coalition, which is the Heroin and Opioid Prevention Education Coalition, engaged in a strategic planning session. We're still waiting for the report from that, but an interesting statistic of note that is in 2016, the drug overdose deaths from opioids were almost 4 times that of traffic fatalities in the state, so that puts a good spin. Fortunately, here we don't have as many as some of the other counties, but it certainly is here as well as all around us. And the only other item I have is this is Police Memorial Week. There's an event at noon Wednesday at the courthouse. It's usually less than an hour. If anybody is down in Bellefonte wants to attend, that'd be terrific. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you.
My full report is also in your packet. Highlighted in blue are some items I'll go over briefly for your benefit and for that of the audience. In response to recent storm damage, the Public Works Department is conducting a special round of brush collection. It started this week, this morning at 7 a.m. We'll do one round of the township. Staff is interviewing 2 firms this week that submitted proposals in response to our request for professional services for the stormwater fee feasibility study. We did receive final reports from some of the Penn State Sustainable Community Collaborative projects. Separately in the consent agenda is recommendations for the award of 2 contracts. One is for the Martin Street pipelining, one is for Fairbrook Park parking lot. We're finishing up our street tree planting this week. If you were on Blue Course Drive, you noticed the planting of 58 trees in the median. They will be working there again tomorrow. Oak wilt treatment will start when the oak trees have leafed out. Meckley Road paving project is currently out to bid for an opening on May 30th. That's all I have to report.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And then we have the Planning and Zoning Director.
Township Planning Commission met on May 8th, discussed the following. We provided an active plan list for the supervisor's consideration. We also provided a set of the latest approved set of meeting minutes for the supervisors to review as well. The first item, draft traditional town development text amendment, was reviewed. Attorney Charlie Sir and Michael Pratt from Keller Engineers, representing Residential Housing and Development LLC, provided a background and rationale for the proposed text amendment. The Planning Commission members expressed concern for modifying the TTD ordinance text as opposed to the applicant applying for appropriate design manual modifications or variances for applicable sections of the zoning ordinance. Attorney Dwight Ferguson, who represents Circleville Road Partners, and Attorney Joe Green attended the meeting and discussed a request that Attorney Ferguson attend the next Planning Commission meeting on May 22nd to present information on behalf of his client prior to the Planning Commission's recommendation on the text amendment. Source water protection, we had State College Borough Water Authority representatives John Lickman, Brian Heiser, and Dave Yoxheimer, along with PADEP Safe Drinking Water staff member Mark Stevens, attend the meeting to answer questions related to regulating land use within the proposed Zone 1 and Township-wide Zone 2, Zone 3, in addition to landowner rights utilizing groundwater or utilizing ground within the proposed Zone 1 area. Dr. Todd Giddings, who's on our work group, also attended to give his perspective of the work group's progress thus far. The presenters offered other avenues to explore in the ordinance, which include educational materials to distribute community-wide and also consideration of best management practices within Zone 1. Planning Commission asked staff to take the draft back to the work group and incorporate these options in the next draft. I have a report here on official map if you'd like me to go through that.
Okay, go ahead and give your report, and then we'll have the discussion on it
Sure.
later.
As you've heard before, we've had 2 public outreach meetings in April on the official map. We also attended we sent the proposed map to Center County Planning Office, Huntington County, and adjacent region the center region municipalities to conclude the 45-day review and comment period prescribed by the municipality's planning code. The CRPC reviewed the draft official map at their May 4th meeting and followed with their recommendation. The Planning Commission recommended that the Board of Supervisors adopt the draft 2017 official map and ordinance with 2 reservations that include proposed bike facility that follows South Nixon Road through designated ag easements from Old Gatesburg to East Pine Grove Road. In addition, property owned by Penn State University designated as potential parkland acquisition adjoining the Whitehall Road Regional Park was also mentioned as a reservation by the Planning Commission. Staff did receive a comment regarding the designation from the CRPC in their review letter, and also an objection letter from Penn State University. The land designation was a result of input from attendees at the first public outreach meeting. This was also presented at the second public outreach meeting as well. That should conclude the items that we discussed at the Planning Commission meeting, and also provided you the April permit activity and also the comparison of 2016, 2017 permits as well.
Thank you. Okay, and then we have the treasurer's report is attached. Was there any comment on that, Dave, or? No, okay, so that was attached to the agenda. Next is the items of old business. First is a continued discussion on an ordinance of the Township of Ferguson, Center County, Pennsylvania, amending Chapter 19, signs and billboards. This is basically here because we've had a couple of times that we've authorized something for advertisement as an ordinance, and then questions came up later. This one's not ready to be advertised yet, but it's a good chance if there are any questions to come up to bring them up now. So I don't know that there's anything in particular that needs to be discussed, but it's on here in case there is. So, is there anything from staff or?
No, I would just say this is the same draft of the ordinance that was reviewed and authorized for public hearing at the May 2nd board meeting, but as Mr. Miller had indicated, while this is sort of atypical for the process, this is a pretty significant ordinance text amendment. It's not legally required to be advertised until May 22nd or 23rd. So there is time if the board had any last-minute questions, revisions, or changes that they wanted to make before it gets advertised for the June 5th public hearing. We thought it might be prudent to include that as a discussion item this evening.
Are there any questions or comments? Laura?
Thank you very much, staff, for your work on this, and I don't have anything that I would want to add or change, but because I do feel like I'm still really relatively new to this, is there anything that you know of that, knowing my thoughts on policy in the township and what the citizens have, brought to the table throughout your time here in Ferguson Township, is there anything that you would recommend in terms of policy direction that we should think about taking that could be put into this before advertising? Thank you. Putting you on the spot, but this is apparently the time to do it. So.
Well, Ray, while Ray's thinking about that, I think one thing that I would point out is that I think that one of the more substantial changes that residents will see from this ordinance is a prohibition on signage in the right-of-way. One of the outcomes of the Gilbert case, which is the Supreme Court case that really was the impetus or the driver behind this amendment, is that municipalities cannot regulate their signage based on content. It's a First Amendment issue. So the recommendation from staff, what's included in this ordinance, is a prohibition on signage in the right-of-way rather than what we've done in the past, which is regulate based on, is it political, is it this type of signage, that type of signage, because those things are unconstitutional right now. And that's going to be an adjustment, I think, for some folks. So I don't know if this is really policy per se, but I think one of the practices that from staff we're going to employ is kind of a public outreach, a notification. I believe that we have already provided notice to the County Office of Elections to notify candidates for the upcoming election that we have these regulations in place, just so that people are aware rather than this ordinance becoming effective and then after the fact when we start to enforce some of these provisions, they find out about our regulations.
Before Ray answers then, so political signs are not exempt from right-of-way prohibitions?
Correct.
So
Correct.
in
That's right.
Ferguson Township, candidates will not be permitted to have their political signs in township right-of-way any longer?
Signage will have to be placed on the property line, or over the property line.
Right, so, okay. But, so then, for example, the middle of Blue Course, the median in Blue Course, that's a right-of-way that it would not be permitted any longer?
Correct.
I'd like to make a motion.
Okay.
I'd like to move that political signs be exempted from the right-of-way prohibition. Ken, is that,
Well, the problem
can't
was
do that, can I?
but what, you could make that
Legally.
motion, and if we passed it, we couldn't enforce it, because
okay,
that would be the problem.
then I retract the motion.
Yeah.
May I ask a follow-up
Sure.
question? How have other municipalities handled then that state law? Have they also decided that signs will be not in the right-of-way in order to handle the content issue?
I'll turn that over to the expert on this, and I think Lindsay Shoke, our community planner, is somewhere in the audience too, and her and Ray both
Thank you.
kind of led the charge on this.
Well, I think in comparison to other municipalities, we'll compare State College Borough. Lori Soash, who's our ordinance enforcement officer, was an enforcement officer there as well. There's no allowance for political signs within the right-of-way in the borough. So she's very familiar with that policy, and I think that's what we're following through with as well, very similar to that. I don't know about the other townships. I know closest to us being the borough, that is something that she has been familiar with and is, following with this ordinance. So we'll be following.
Thank you.
There's certainly an implementation lag, I think, with the timing of the Gilbert decision that came down from the U.S. Supreme Court and municipalities being able to adjust to the new regulations. So I wouldn't say that we're at the forefront of this. Many municipalities across the state and country have adopted regulations in compliance with the Gilbert decision, but there's also others that haven't been able to make those changes yet.
The other portions of that with political signage is that it's allowed to be placed 30 days prior to primary election or the November election, and those signs need to be taken down within 3 days after the election day. So we feel that's an important timeline for folks to understand, as Lori will be out there looking for those situations where they are in violation.
Good to know. Then Ray, the follow-up to you that I had asked originally, are there any other policy direction before we get this ready for advertising that you think we should consider that haven't been yet?
Well, I think we did a comprehensive overview of the ordinance in dealing with both exempt signs and temporary signage. We looked into, we had some requests for digital message centers for churches, for some other businesses that would like to change their announcement boards, if you will, and to make it more convenient. We had a discussion with one church that would like to place a digital message center and showed us some examples of another church that has done that similarly. And we've looked at some of the standards and criteria within the U.S. Sign Council's recommendations on those types of signs, where it basically says, you shouldn't prohibit as a municipality, you should actually develop standards to your character. And I know some people don't agree with that because of the illumination of those types of signs, but we've tried to put some standards in the ordinance for daylight and nighttime illuminance.
Oh, great. Thanks for being attentive to those details.
One of the other items that we've discussed in the past is the TOD signs. And as we went through the ordinance and talked with folks from the Planning Commission, folks that are interested in seeing that happen, we looked at the guidelines that were suggested to us, and what we're doing is allowing for the state TOD signs within state right-of-way, but we're also recognizing, more importantly, that within the township right-of-way, that there is an opportunity for the smaller TOD signs to get to a destination within the township that may be of interest to a tourist or visitor.
I think that's really great, and I appreciate you doing that. I also appreciate you making the size be an appropriate size. I think it's I think we have some control over it. And thank you for being attentive to that detail, too.
Lindsay researched some of the design standards for that within the guidelines, and we want to include both, or its direction, the symbol of, let's say, a winery, and then the text that goes along with that. I think it's 6 square feet is what we've calculated at, so we feel that's important to get people to those destinations as well.
Thank you. Thanks.
I know there's a lot that had gone into that ordinance, and I want to thank, Jeff and Lindsay for their input. Jeff's going to have to enforce that, and hopefully we made it easier for him. So that's our approach to it, and I know there's a lot of new terminology in there as well. We tried to update as many sign terms as possible to get it up to speed with the current court case.
Peter,
Yeah, just really quick, there's a lot of people out there who do not know what TOD is.
Tourist-oriented destination.
Thank you.
Yeah, like the winery, so people can find our winery now.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, so we have Pam or Bill? You had a comment on the sign ordinance?
What you're talking about,
Yeah.
I'm sorry that I'm not up to speed on the sign ordinance, but I am very interested in it. Pam Steckler, I live in Ferguson Township. Like I said, I'm sorry, I'm totally ignorant about this, but I am interested in it. Are signs, the size of signs allowable per length of storefront? Is this part of this?
Depends on the use. In a situation where you may have a commercial building, there may be allowance for window signs, but also for a ground sign.
Well, window signs oftentimes need to be inside the window.
Correct.
Okay, but the exterior signs, is there a formula for that?
The wall signs, let's say for instance, if that's an allowance, would be a square footage for the wall sign.
Okay, square footage of wall sign as per length of store frontage, or?
I may have to ask Jeff or Lindsay to help me on that one, because
Okay.
I'm
just curious about how they came up with that. And also, this is something that just bugged me over the years. When I had my shop in town, there were really specific formula. You could not have a sign bigger than X if your storefront was only that wide. And then I saw a lot of things going on with these lit awnings. And they were huge. And they were signage. And I wondered how that got around what the little stores had to deal with. And I just want to make sure that that's something that's considered in this. I'm trying to think, well, Sheetz has those big giant awning things and lit up, and I mean, they sort of take over the landscape. I think, trying to think of where else. I think that new building that has those big orange awnings for the donut place, they sort of take the place over. I mean, there's a couple of examples around where you see small stores have to have their little signs, and then these big guys have these gigantic things. Also, in terms of the landscape, I am pretty offended by these gigantic billboards that light up bright LEDs, and they're flashing stuff in your face. And I'm wondering if that's something that's going to be included in this. I think they're very, they take your eye away from driving. They're very disruptive. And you can see them from like miles. Is that included in this, or is that a separate ordinance?
I believe we did not go to that approach of allowing for the digital billboard per se. Billboards are allowed in only the commercial zoning district.
Right,
but
what about the
typical-
digitals?
Not the digital billboards.
Are they disallowed specifically?
Well, we don't want to say disallowed.
Well, that's what I'm worried about, because if you don't say they're disallowed.
We don't allow digital billboards. The typical sign billboard is allowed. It still is allowed, it has been, and I believe this, square footage is the same as it was in the old ordinance.
Right, but it doesn't specifically outlaw digitals. So what happens if somebody wants to put a digital up?
Digital billboards, again, we don't allow for in the ordinance.
They won't be able.
Message centers.
So they can't.
Right, message centers
Good.
are allowed within the guidelines of the ordinance.
And a message center is just a little thing that says
A message
something's
center,
going on
di-
Tuesday or whatever.
Digital message center may have the church sign, and then on the bottom, a digital
the bar.
message center that says service at 7 a.m.
Right, okay. But the big giant billboards are not.
No, that, we heard that in the
Thank you.
past from other folks, and they did not want to see
You're
that in
bad.
Ferguson.
Okay, thank you very much.
Bill?
Bill Heckinger, I live at 127 Hoy Street. Just to add to Pam, are there any technical specifications that you're considering for brightness that would maybe tie in with the lighting ordinance?
There is a table, an luminance table that we have in the ordinance, and if you receive a draft of that, you can take a look at how that's table 1, and it provides detailed information about what types of illumination are permitted by each use, and it goes by each land use, but then the illumination type would be internal message center sign, external or digital display, the brightness limitation, and for the most part, in the daytime, there's a standard for 5,000 nits, at nighttime 750 nits, which are both levels of illuminance. And then in the industrial IRD, those same standards apply, with a duration in both those use districts, such as office, general commercial, industrial, or IRD, at 10 seconds.
So we won't get any of those signs like you see along Route 80 that blind you because the
ordinance-
nighttime goes way down.
Those signs would not be allowable within Ferguson Township because of the
Yeah. Okay.
location and lack of the highways.
Any other, Laura?
I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to make a motion that we make the sign ordinance gender neutral. It states on page 2 that the masculine gender includes the feminine and neuter. So I just thought that since we did that with the administrative code, that we should do that with this code as well, and eventually the whole book will be gender neutral.
Chair, I would like to note that there is not actually a motion on the table. So we can't, I don't know that we could, are we able to
We can-
amend something?
Yeah, we can, because we're discussing so this would be a motion to amend
Okay.
sign orders prior to
Great.
bringing it up for, that was the purpose of this meeting.
Cool.
So we can, if there's a,
Should I rephrase that?
no.
Second.
Yeah, so we have a motion and a second that prior to advertising, we revise the ordinance to be gender neutral. Is there any discussion?
Same discussion as previously noted in the previous discussion of gender neutrality.
Okay, seeing no further discussion, all in favor of the amendment to the ordinance, vote aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None, motion carries. Any further discussion of the sign ordinance before we advertise it?
I'd like to make another motion, Chair, thank you. I'd like to move that on page 15, under item 17, educational agricultural event sign, that we include okay, so I'll just read it. Signs erected for the limited time period of 2 weeks during a year in the AR zoning, this is probably not where I want to amend this. I'd like to expand the zoning districts that would include that these signs are permitted. So my motion is to expand the allowance of educational agricultural event signs into the agricultural zoning districts as well as the agricultural research zoning districts.
Okay, and these are specifically for Ag Progress
Events.
Days? Or
Right.
events at the ag.
Any ag event, though.
Right.
It could
The
be any
events
ag
at the,
event.
but at that site, yeah.
So why limit it just to them? Other agriculture, did I get a second yet?
Second.
So why limit it just to education at that one site? Why not other farm education events, like extension education events or homesteading education events, that kind of thing?
I guess I would first
But is that
ask
an
staff
amendment
if
of
that-
actually the zoning code as
Does that
opposed
create
to this?
something that, I mean, would that amendment be a problem?
Mr. Chair, I suspect that there may be a land use issue with regards to educational events at rural agricultural RA zoned land use.
That would be bad.
Well, I mean, an example of something like that taking place might be the Coker Horse
Yeah.
Show. And now, I don't believe that Mrs. Coker puts any signage up outside on the edge of her property or anything like that to indicate the event's taking place, but that's a piece of land zone, rural agricultural, that may fall under this type of regulation if she so chose to sign it.
Well, I would support announcing educational opportunities for agricultural events. As in my other life as an agricultural educator, I'm all for it. I just want to make sure that we're consistent and that it would apply to the other zoning districts. And I think in the case that you indicate that that is a permitted use.
Yes, correct.
Okay. And it is true that Extension may have farm-based education on a particular site.
That they want to sign for.
Yeah, they're not
use of-
typically public, public access events, but wayfinding signs might be important.
Yeah,
And upcoming and please register kind of signs might be helpful.
These signs then are temporary signs that are put up and left up so long and?
Yeah,
okay.
limited time period of 2
2
weeks
Okay.
during a year.
Yeah, I think.
Sounds like we actually, if we want to enable that, would have another kind of sign.
Yeah, I think this specific item 17 is really referring to Ag Progress Days.
Yeah, you're right. Now that I'm reading
It's a-
that, I see how that's the case. If we wanted to enable another kind of farm education event sign, we would do that independently.
When Ag Progress Days occurs, they receive a permit for the
Right.
use for those 2 weeks. And I believe this covers their signage for that 2 weeks as
Right.
well.
Gotcha. Okay, something to think about then,
Yeah.
maybe.
So to deal with your motion, maybe make a motion
Yeah.
to postpone it indefinitely.
Motion to postpone indefinitely.
I'll second. So all in favor of the motion to postpone the amendment indefinitely?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Okay.
Thank you for,
And we could look at that later as a.
Great, thank
As a
you.
change to the sign ordinance if we wanted to expand something then.
thank you. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else on the sign ordinance display? Okay, Pam, do you have something brief?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, this was something else that I thought of regarding lit signs. Is there anything in the ordinance that would provide for a shade? That if, oftentimes you see lit signs and then there's a residential property nearby and they're bathed in this light. Is there a way that we could say, lights have to be shown down or only upon the sign and how much light gets around to other properties is limited? Is that within that?
I'm trying to find that, Pam. I know we have language similar to that.
Sorry, I haven't seen all of this, but that's a biggie, because I know, like on College Avenue, there's a,
I think we have
We're gonna get
an answer coming.
hello, my answer.
We have a lighting ordinance too, so.
Yes.
That would be included in the lighting ordinance.
Well-
And reviewed by our consulting engineer, Scott Brown, looks at all of those when a new light. And in this case, if a new sign is proposed, he would have to, in some cases, review those to the lighting should be really intense.
Okay, because I know like on College Avenue, there's a gas station, and they have, it's daylight when you're going to pump gas at night. and those lights shine right across the street to residences. And that's within our lighting ordinance. So it's,
When that was before the term, before the time that Scott was reviewing those, so no, I wasn't around for that specific case.
yeah.
But I do know
But I mean,
that-
there's plenty of places around that, there's a lot of light that's shooting all over the place that's not on the person's property or signage. And I think that's something, in terms of dark skies and in terms of bothering neighbors, I think that's really important to be sure it's included.
We tried to keep, Scott Brown, our consulting engineer, took a look at our our sign ordinance and compared it to the lighting, and everything that's in here is a lot less than what can be proposed in our lighting ordinance. So this should be.
Better.
Yes, better
Okay.
to keep this guy.
Okay, good, thank you.
Pam, the specific language that is in here on illumination, under section 4, sign illumination, light sources. Light sources to illuminate signs shall neither be visible from any street right-of-way nor cause glare, hazardous or distracting to pedestrians, vehicle drivers, or adjacent properties. The amount of detectable light, no more than .2 foot candles of light, shall be detectable at the boundary of any abutting property.
Okay, great, thank you.
Sorry, it took me a little bit.
Thanks, Lindsay. Yep. Okay, Laura.
I have a de minimis spelling correction that you probably want to take care of before advertising. On page 12, E4, no attraction board, it should be sign.
Okay,
Thanks.
and so at this point, are we ready to move on?
Yes.
Okay. Now we go to new business. First is the consent agenda, which includes
Don't we have to vote?
2 contracts, a pay authorization for contract, surety release, and the April 2017 voucher report. Anything on that anyone cares to pull out as an agenda item? No, that was just a discussion.
Okay,
So,
great.
Yeah, so,
Nothing to pull out.
okay, then I'll take motion on the consent agenda.
Motion to approve the consent agenda?
Second.
We have a motion and a second, all in favor? Motion carries 5-0. Now we will go to the item that we moved up on the agenda, which is the proposed climate action resolution. I think Peter's going to take the
Yeah, I'm
lead in that
I'm
discussion.
going to go to the podium. That's all right. So, excuse me, citizens and staff and board members, I'm really excited to introduce this resolution on climate change for Ferguson Township. To begin, I just want to say that today there is unequivocal evidence and overwhelming consensus across all sectors that humans have dangerously interfered with the climate system. There's also broad agreement that all organizations must act quickly to prevent harm, to adapt to new challenges, and innovate our economies to ensure a safe and just space for humanity, including, of course, Ferguson's residents. The roadmap agreed to under the Paris Agreement, which is included in the resolution, is the most widely agreed upon path, and I propose that we approach meeting its goals. So tonight I'm going to go over a few areas. They include, hey Dave, what do I do here? Oh, there we go. I'll say a bit about the science behind climate change, some risk assessments and statements by some high-level folks, and address the resolution before concluding. So I will say that climate change is already impacting the citizens of Ferguson Township in ways that don't seem obvious, but are significant for farming, our forests, energy use, outdoor recreation, water quality and management, and for human health. So, as the resolution indicates, multiple assessments by scientific organizations have concluded that humans have changed Earth's climate in significant ways. Since the Industrial Revolution, we have wrapped The Earth in a thicker blanket of greenhouse gases, most prominently carbon dioxide, followed by methane, nitrous oxide, and other trace gases. And this thicker blanket of greenhouse gases has amplified the greenhouse effect depicted here, courtesy of the EPA. Light from the sun, very briefly, comes to the Earth, some of it heating the Earth's surface. Some of that heat is trapped in the Earth's atmosphere, and some of it is emitted to space. But the more that we concentrate greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, the more heat we trap. The greenhouse effect, I should say, has been understood since the 1820s. The fact that carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas has been understood since the 1850s, and the first assessment of what would happen to the Earth's temperature if we doubled the concentration of CO2 predates 1900. So all that is to say that the science behind this is very old, in the way that old science is good science because it's science that has survived. Now, hey, whoa. All right, yes, I got it. So as of just last month, carbon dioxide concentrations in the Earth's atmosphere went over 410 parts per million, which is about a 40% increase since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. As expected, that has led to increased temperature, increased temperatures, higher temperatures, such that as of 2016, last year, which was a record-setting year after breaking 2015's record, which broke 2014's record, and concludes 3 decades of consistent record-breaking decades of temperature rise, that we have warmed the planet about 1 degree Celsius, or about 2 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, some people will say, oh, well, the climate is always changing. The climate does not change this fast. The only way that this happens is if we add massive amounts of greenhouse gases to the atmosphere to get 10 of the hottest years on record in the last 19. And you cannot explain this without carbon dioxide being added to the atmosphere. This shows a correlation. I wish there was a trend line here, but you can just look at this. And were we to draw a trend line, we have basically flat and then upticks. And we cannot doubt that CO2 and other greenhouse gases are driving increased temperatures. Oops. Now, some people will say, well, maybe it's natural variation. It is not natural variation. In fact, if we were to only deal with natural factors, we would anticipate possible slight cooling. And when we put natural and human factors together, primarily the burning of fossil fuels and the changing of land use, we would predict increased temperatures, as this graph shows. So the observations are here in black, and what we would expect is in the blue, and we are trending right along the middle of that. Now, if we do not act, many reports now from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, from the National Climate Impact Assessment, and others predict that if we do nothing to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions, that we will warm the Earth upwards of 4.5 degrees Celsius, close to 9 degrees Fahrenheit, in the space of less than 150 years. That is a geological blink of an eye, and comparable to, possibly exceeding the warming that took place from the beginning of the end of the last ice age to the Holocene. It is a mammoth change in temperature in dangerous directions. So what are some of the impacts? Well, already we are seeing more record highs versus record lows. If all things were equal, we would see about a 1-to-1. What we see now is 2-to-1 record highs versus record lows. If we continue business as usual by middle of the century, well, not necessarily middle of the century, but if we do 3 degrees Celsius warming, we will see 15 record highs to 1 record low, which is an astronomical change. We've already seen impacts from storm intensity So increased deluges. So already in the Northeast, we see that there's a 71% increase in heavy rainfall events compared to about 30 years ago. Some people have talked about the major flooding event that we saw last fall as not caused by climate change, but in attribution studies as being more likely. And we should anticipate that such things will happen more. Now, we also know distant from us that there's significant ice cap melt, so if you are paying attention right now to Greenland or Antarctica, there are major destabilizations of those ice sheets. There's also glacial melt from mountains, as well as melting of extant sea ice around Antarctica and the Arctic. Now, some of these, such as ice cap melt, contribute significantly to the next problem, which is sea level rise. So already we are seeing sea level rise, and in the United States there is significant sea level rise. If you go to the coast of Louisiana, sea level rise there is higher than it is in other places, such that the folks who live in this house at the Ile de Jean Charles, out in the bathtub of Louisiana, they are losing their homes. I should also note that these people are poor and they are also indigenous. Finally, this is something that certainly is impacting us here, the migration of species such that ticks are now more able to expand their territory. They carry Lyme disease. I take this very personally because I got Lyme disease from a tick, and I love spending time in the woods. But we are already seeing more ticks because they are killed by fewer cold snaps. So you go back to the slide about record highs versus record lows. With fewer lows, we don't hold them in check. So, who's calling for change? All right, for us to act. Now, here I have Pope Francis, who wrote Laudato Si. He is not the only member of the faith community who is calling for action on climate change. There are also leaders from from Protestant communities, Jewish communities, Muslim communities, Sikh communities, Hindu communities, Buddhist leaders, etc., who are saying that we should act on climate change, some of them invoking the Paris Agreement in particular. But it's not just peaceful people. It is also the people who are conducting national intelligence assessments. Okay, Dan Coates there is on the left. He's our current Director of National Intelligence, and the recent assessment that came out on national intelligence recognized climate change as a threat. Also, the Quadrennial Defense Review, which is conducted by the Pentagon, certainly not the most liberal green organization in the world, recognize that climate change is a threat multiplier that introduces cascading impacts that destabilize already unstable people. Now, currently, we could look to Africa and Syria even as examples of where climate instability has affected people. But if you look at projected drought maps of the American Southwest, we know that we are going to be facing some of these same issues, though we are a much wealthier society. Finally, lots and lots of people who handle lots of money are telling us that we should act on climate change, and specifically to follow the Paris Agreement. This includes the World Economic Forum. This image is from them. The World Economic Forum recognizes climate change and severe weather impacts as comparable to terrorist attacks and above pandemics. So these are very serious risk assessments. So not acting on climate change, they rate as having one of the most negative consequential effects on the global economy. They're joined by the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, 200 investors who handled $15 trillion in investment assets as of last week. Hank Paulson, Art Laffer, and George Shultz, three very prominent former Republican cabinet members who are calling for action on climate change. Finally, who else is calling for change? People who are affected right now. The people on the left are from Louisiana. The people on the right are from Tuvalu, a low-lying island nation. Once again, poor and indigenous people. Now, I believe that under the Constitution of Pennsylvania, that we are called to act. Article 1, Section 27 states that the people have a right to the natural, scenic, historic, and aesthetic values of the environment. And under no scenario regarding climate change, any assessment worth its salt will say that these are not threatened. So I believe that as citizens of Pennsylvania and elected officials who should uphold the Constitution, that we are duty-bound to do this. I will also note that our Home Rule Charter has a Community and Environmental Bill of Rights attached to it with a sustainable energy future guaranteed within it. And this board's strategic plan, which we worked on last fall, specifically addresses several of the things called for and recognized in the resolution, including environmental stewardship, economic development, renewable energy, and also backed up by sound scientific decision-making. I'll note that 250,000 people are employed in the solar industry right now, probably more, 100,000 in wind, and when you add the green building economy to that, we are approaching 3 million people. Over 60,000 of them live in Pennsylvania. Over 4,000 people work in solar in Pennsylvania. There are more people working in solar in the United States than there are in coal, oil, and natural gas combined. Yes. Now, the township has already taken a set of actions that I think set us up to have the groundwork for what could be a plan that could come from this resolution, and that includes our action on stormwater, including our assessment of the possibility of an impact fee. We have had the comprehensive assessment of our property for solar. We are doing a LEED Gold building for our public works, the zoning and saldo update, the fact that we have already worked with the Sustainable Communities Collaborative, which is affiliated with the Sustainability Institute where I work. There's a lot of interest in alternative transportation and the recent COG action to purchase RECs. So as the resolution states, and you have it before you, these are the final words within it. And it does call for us to develop a strategy and something of a timeline that we should lead by example and that we should engage our peers in this. Now, I just want to end by quoting Spider-Man, because I like Spider-Man. But Uncle Ben says to Peter Parker, with great power comes great responsibility. And I believe that that we know fully well that we are the cause of climate change. And that isn't necessarily something to feel guilty about. It's just a simple recognition that we are, to some degree, responsible for this. And that we also know the risks that are out there, and that as people elected to deal with problems of pressing public concern, that it is incumbent on us to act, and that we are, given our place where we live, with the people we work with, that we are in a unique position and a privileged position to act today. So I appreciate your time very much and your patience in letting me present and introduce this resolution, and I look forward to discussing it. Thank you.
So I guess,
I know there are people in the audience.
right, yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, we have, let's see, on the agenda, we're calling for a motion to move this to the public hearing as a resolution.
Discussion.
Yeah. I guess normally we start with if the public wants to comment. At this point, we can have public comment. If you're just coming up to say, yeah, I agree with Peter, if we could have a show of hands of who agrees with Peter, we start with that. If there's something you'd like to add to the discussion, please do that fairly briefly. And if you come to the podium and identify yourself, please. Yeah. Oh.
Yes, my name is Ed Perry. I'm with the National Wildlife Federation. Thank you for allowing me to speak to you. I just want to add a few things you might not have thought of. Peter focused tackling or greenhouse gases because it would reduce the effects of climate change. But if someone came to you with a proposal to create jobs and reduce pollution, I think everyone here would be in favor of that. And so when you think about tackling climate change, you have to think about how much of our energy is coming from coal right now. It's 30% of our energy comes from coal. Less than 1% comes from solar, yet they employ, this industry that supplies so little of our electricity already employs more people than coal does right now. So if you want to put our fellow Americans back to work with a made-in-America energy solution, solar and wind is the way to go. Another benefit is the amount of pollution that we're creating by using fossil fuels. Because of burning coal, every state in our country is contaminated with mercury to one degree or another, and resulting in every single state having a fish consumption advisory for mercury, including Pennsylvania, which lists another 86 streams and lakes that are so contaminated with mercury that they don't recommend women of childbearing age eating more than one fish meal per month. And that's common all across the country. It's from burning coal. Natural gas doesn't have the same impact in terms of releasing mercury, but we are turning the last best wild part of our state into a vast industrial force, getting at that last drop of oil and gas. And the damage to the water supplies of our residents and land are continuing. So finally, by reducing our use of fossil fuel and moving on to clean renewable energy, we're going to be protecting our nation's wildlife heritage. Already, the scientists are telling us we're going to lose, here in Pennsylvania, our state fish, the brook trout, our state tree, the hemlock, and our state bird, the ruffed grouse. This is already happening. Game Commission did a study and found that we've already lost 28,000 breeding males in the last 20 years of ruffed grouse. Already we've lost a third of our brook trout habitat, and when you talk to the fishing guides, they don't take people out in the summer like they used to because the water's so hot. And our local fly shop, Fly Fisher's Paradise, talks about losing thousands of dollars a year because of the changing in the insect rise patterns that anglers have come to rely on. Insect rise occur at certain dates, and the anglers around the country and the state know about this. So when they call up and say, well, the caddis hatch occurred already, they said, oh, it's a couple of weeks ago. They're not coming to Pennsylvania. Now, some people might think that what difference can a lowly township make on this issue? But the fact is, because our elected representatives at the state and federal level not only refuse to take action on climate change, but they are doing everything they can to reverse the progress we've already made. So, if we're going to succeed at this, it's going to have to come from the ground up. It's going to have to come from people like you at this township that make a commitment to do something, and we're going to take that and then go to other places and say, look what this township has done. So I want to thank you for even considering to do this, and anything I can do to help you move this ball forward, I'll be glad to do. Thank you.
I want to thank you for your leadership on alternative transportation. Got me here. And I'm here, my name is Cricket Hunter, and I'm here in my role as the Director of Program and Outreach for Pennsylvania Interfaith Power and Light. We're a statewide organization, one of 40 state affiliates of Interfaith Power and Light Network nationally. I'm here, we're an organization that helps congregations in particular, but congregations and communities to respond to climate change. We signed, along with a number of other statewide organizations, onto the resolution from which the resolution in front of you has been adapted. And I want to commend you as the board and Peter for bringing this in front of the Board of Supervisors of Ferguson Township so quickly. It's an extraordinary example, and one that we will play a role in celebrating and carrying to other townships to be an example and to help them move forward. It's really very exciting. There are specific, urgent, and hopeful goals. And it's clear that real impacts are felt at the municipal and county level, and that's also where the real work gets done. It's clear in the work that you're doing tonight and in the work that you've connected that you've been doing already towards sustainability and towards supporting your citizenry and moving forward in a way that they feel good about into the future. So thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Jonathan Brockup. I'm a resident of State College, also with Pennsylvania Interfaith Power and Light. I only want to add to what Cricket said, that I brought 10 of my friends over here on their bicycles. Some of us are, in fact, Ferguson Township residents, and we rode on your beautiful country roads that we enjoy very much with our riding. We are leaving on Friday to go to Washington, D.C., to bring our message about action on climate change, particularly from a faith-based perspective, that climate change is a moral issue for us. And so I can't tell you how excited I am to be able to say that Ferguson Township is even considering this and hopefully will in fact approve this resolution. This is going to really help our message not only throughout the state, but as we talk to our representatives in Congress. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Nathan Geiger. I'm a grad student at Penn State, and I'm a grad student in social psychology, so I just wanted to say I've done a pretty good variety of survey research and worked with other collaborators as well. And our research consistently shows that the solutions to climate change are broadly popular with a large majority of Americans. So things like solar, Americans love solar, other things like that. So I'd like to say that by supporting this resolution, you're not only doing the right thing, but you're also doing the thing that's going to be popular with a lot of people in your constituency. Thank you.
Hello. Hi. My name's Colleen Unrow. I'm a resident of Ferguson Township. Some of you might remember me. Some of you sued me. Anyway, I'm here. I'm a grad student, and my work has consistently been around environmental justice and sustainability. I worked as a community organizer in Eastern Kentucky for 8 years, working with communities that were getting pummeled by the coal industry. And that included work at the local, federal, state levels, trying to get mining laws enforced, including things around mine safety. And the consistent reality is that communities where fossil fuel dominates, people don't have access to clean water, they don't have access to good jobs. I could go on and on about the issues with fossil fuels. But I also wanted to say that I think that this resolution is a really important example and symbol of the potential that we have locally as well as in communities across the country. For example, in Benham and Lynch, two of the communities I worked with, primarily with retired coal miners, they also had a different kind of vision. And so Carl Shoup in particular, who is a third-generation coal miner, had said, consistently, coal mining is part of our past, it's part of our present, but it doesn't have to be a part of our future. And at the present time, they're installing solar panels on their coal mining museum. So it's not like this isn't something that people across the country want, and I think that we have the potential to lead here in Ferguson Township because I think our community is pretty great. So y'all should pass this resolution because it's great, and also because, as you might remember from the last election, people care about water in this community and they care about sustainability. And so I hope that you remember that and vote with your conscience and your heart and your soul and all those good things to, you know, better future beyond coal and all that other jazz. Yeah, there you go.
Good evening. I'm Scott Flume, resident of Ferguson Township. Thank you for giving this presentation and proposing this. What I'd like to offer is, if I can be of help, and one particular aspect is that I think one of the things that there's a lot of passion here, and rightly so. I think one of the things that can sometimes happen is that this is a scientific discussion, and it needs to still always remain grounded in science, despite the rightful passion for it. And the discussion is going to affect people, and it's going to be a change, and there's going to be fear and concern for what it's going to mean for people's lives. And I think what would be useful at a township level or any municipal government level, if we're going to have a discussion like this, is to figure out how we can, in a civil way, in a respectful way, but still based in science, is how do we go about educating the people in a regular way, and maybe it's on a weekly or monthly basis, that there's a forum where people come and sit down and hear other people's sides, so that over time people are not feeling like the emotion is trumping, for lack of a better word, is somehow leading the conversation and not the science. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Well, I think, Bill?
Bill Heckinger, 127 Hoy Street. I think if this resolution is passed, it can bring a lot of good to Ferguson Township, because it's going to make people feel empowered to come up here, or maybe more qualified than I am to say stuff, who just don't come because they'll know that we have this resolution and they'll want to do something, and they'll say, hey, I know how to do this. And as I was thinking about this, I had the wrong idea about what this was all about, but a nuts and bolts thing that we could do right now is lots of times when we have development, they cut down big trees and they'll plant new trees. When you plant a new tree, we need a tree that's sequestering carbon over the next 30 years. Any big tree that's there is doing the best job that we can get in Ferguson Township of sequestering carbon. And so any tree that's going to be living over the next 30 critical years should be saved. And as an example, we have a big pine tree in the lot next to our lot behind our house. And the carbon in that tree, the tree itself and the trunk of the tree, if I have calculations here, I can give you, Steve, because you're a chemist, you would understand what's going on. Anyway, it's the carbon in all the air going up above that the ground on 2/3 of one of the lots in our section of town, all the air above that. That's how much carbon that tree has in it. And that tree, if you cut it down, you're taking away its ability to keep sequestering that carbon. That tree is dead. That tree might have some grass underneath it. That doesn't sequester nearly as much carbon. If you cut down a big tree in the forest, there could be rocks there, and you could go 30 years later and there'll still be a rock slide there. There'll be no tree. So we need to shape our development laws so that we preserve big trees. It's just that tree, I don't have my glasses, but anyway, it's thousands of pounds of carbon, and, oh, thanks. That tree has 1,470 pounds of carbon, and it's 34 inches at the base, and it goes up and it has a weird shape, but it's like a big, you can approximate it as a cone conservatively. And you can do your, estimate the volume of the tree, and you can only really use dry wood. So, because the water in a tree varies with season, it varies with the height in the tree, varies with all kinds of things. You figure out some dry wood, you see that pine, the wood industry calls dry pine 25 pounds per cubic foot, and you go through all this, and when you come out in the end and you figure out the amount of carbon in the air at 420 parts per million, you get that this tree has all this carbon of all the air above 3/4 of our lot. So trees are very significant. I mean, the oceans might be more important in some ways, but trees have a really strong effect on the carbon. So we need to save big trees.
Thank you. Okay, so I think now we'll go with motion. I'm assuming you would like to make a motion?
I'm comfortable either moving this forward as a motion or having it, okay, I will move that the Board of Supervisors adopt the climate change resolution. Ask staff to prepare prepare the resolution on climate action.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion from the board concerning this? Janet?
Yes. I always feel like I'm going against the stream, and as was mentioned several months ago, Peter and I can agree to disagree, but I still feel a need to look at another viewpoint instead of just the popular viewpoint. And this afternoon, I jotted some thoughts down. I'd just like to share them. I, as an elected representative, am against bringing political national agendas into our local arena. Technology today is so dynamic that for us to sit here and pontificate a goal for 35 years from now is unrealistic for our constituents. I do believe, like many of you said, that we need to be good stewards of our resources. I agree with you 100% there. Peter, in your presentation, you started off by saying there are multiple scientific organizations. You did not say all organizations. So there's disagreement in the scientific community on this. You mentioned there are people, all people are calling for a change. I don't know if all people are calling for a change. I also believe that our staff has better things to do now, existing now, than to try to forecast what is going to happen 35 years from now. Because we had no idea how fast the computer would change our lives. What do we know that's going to happen 35 years from now? We don't know that. And I think we're being a little, for lack of a better word, arrogant to make us look good now when we're talking 20, 50, 35 years from now. It's just, I'm just not in favor of tying our hands to a resolution because I just feel that that is just giving us more regulations and I don't know. I just feel that it's giving us more regulations that are going to tie us down when we don't know what technology is going to do. Technology could answer some of this stuff the way we're going. because I think you'd agree that things are happening so quickly. So we don't know what the technology's going to be like in 20 years, let alone 30. So that's my contribution. I know it's not popular, but I'm known to go against popular belief.
Thank you, Janet. And Laura.
Thank you, Chair Miller, and thank you, Janet, for sharing. I myself have been in the unpopular position seat, and I know how difficult it is, so thank you. My perspective is, however, a little bit different. When I was in college in the late 80s, we read a document or a book called Limits to Growth by Meadows and Meadows. And in that book, there were early simulations of trajectories about scarcity and resource use and climate. And this was a report that the United States government requested and then took the information from it and said, boy, if those things are true, we are in big trouble. But since we don't know they're true, we're just going to mosey on along and do the same old thing. Well, all of those predictions have come true, if not worse than true. And, you know, just recalling how horrified I was to find that our government had sat in a seat far more powerful than the one I sit in, and declined to act on behalf of their citizens. You know, that I don't want to do that. So I'm going to act on this, and I'm going to act strongly because I hear the voice of the people and the 99.99% of scientists that all agree on this, other than the ones that work for think tanks that are funded by fossil fuels, those kinds of things. So the science is, I think, indisputable. It has been for many, many years, and the only position that, or the only things I have to say about the resolution is I'd like to add a few things, and I have a few grammatical comments. Thank you very much for bringing it forward, and thank you all for coming out in support of it.
Anyone else?
I would just say that I support the resolution. I think that forward-thinking, strategic initiatives such as this are the kind of thing that a board is responsible for as part of our strategic plan, and this meshes well with the direction that we've been talking about. And I guess I would reflect to those here in support of this resolution and those not, that regardless, this is not the only thing that is necessary to make any kind of change or to affect, if you think that there is a problem that needs to be addressed, and that there are already others choosing to ride their bikes, in fact, to this very meeting, or choosing to carry their grocery bags instead of using others. And I think as a local and regional community, we're already making decisions as individuals and families in this direction, and that this echoes the feeling of those folks that I feel I represent.
Peter?
Okay. There are a couple of things I want to thank Ms. Grafe and Ms. Danini and Ms. Whitaker for their comments. I certainly appreciate them. I do apologize for the typos and run-on sentence. And there's actually an error in there, the name of a report, but we'll get to that later.
Do you want, somebody is asking to read the resolution, because I don't think we've.
Oh, we could. We are going to read it at the following.
Yeah, when we get to the public hearing.
Yeah, we would read it. So I guess the two things that I want to say, and I want to address what you raised, Janet, is that the first thing is that there is basically no disagreement in the scientific community about whether or not humans are causing climate change. It is basically, it doesn't exist. There are a handful of cranks often paid by fossil fuel industry money, who are using the tobacco strategy to undermine the public's understanding of what is an absolutely clear signal. Now, on a personal note, I work with a bunch of these people. I work alongside them and get to see the incredible work that they do. And they do incredible, incredible things. And there are like thousands of them and this little handful of people who basically cherry pick and take things apart. And if you look at the association level of organizations of scientists, the American Geophysical Union, just line them up. And every major meteorological organization, Australia, Japan, Britain, at the UN, there is no disagreement about this. The second thing is that I think that it's incumbent upon us. I agree with you, technology is changing really fast. It's changed a lot. And I think that it's incumbent on us to plan for that change so that we can use the opportunity when it arises so that we can act quickly, intelligently, as the good stewards that we have told our constituents we would be. So that's all I have to say.
I guess my comment is I do favor this resolution. I would not say that the science is either indisputable or that it's fact, because I think that if it's indisputable, it's not science. But I think it's overwhelming evidence that.
I think I used the term virtually.
Virtually. But anyway, I do believe it's overwhelming. And I believe that, I've followed it a number of years through my profession, going to conferences. And so I think that this is a small step, but it's the biggest step that we can take as a board. I think it's regrettable that so much of this has become a very political thing.
True.
And I think if you get beyond the politics of it to the scientific research, that whatever we can do to move in the right direction, move in this direction is the right thing to do. So
great.
So I guess we have a motion, a second. Or did you have something else?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to clarify, if we wanted to pull any of the dialogue from the citizens into what we're recommending to staff, now would be the time,
Right.
yeah? Well, I just wanted to say that I didn't realize it when I read through this, but like habitat destruction and species extinction, I don't know that they were explicitly stated in here. I don't recall that they were. And I'm wondering if we could work them in there, perhaps even with, insect-borne diseases and spreading, blah, 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 that one. So I don't know if we need a motion for that, because that's a content change, or?
I think the best thing to do with that, because this really hasn't been drafted in final form yet, is if you get it to Peter or Dave, I think that Peter will be working with staff to get a final
Gotcha.
version to bring to us as a resolution.
Okay.
So, suggestions for
Super.
wording, if you could do that.
Yeah, I would say if board members have things that they want to revise or add to this resolution, to send them to me, and then I can work them in and have Peter take a look, or, it'll be a work in progress then before it comes back before the board for public hearing.
And then we'll see it at the public hearing, and if we want, with the resolution, we could actually make changes at the time of the public hearing, because it's not an ordinance. So-
You don't have to
So we can
advertise.
amend a resolution if there's something that
Okay.
gets missed in the drafting, so.
And then for the folks here, what would be the timeline on that if they wanted to make sure they would try to attend at the revised? Would that be the next meeting? or-
Probably the meeting after next. I think the next meeting, we have a lot on coming up, don't we, Dave?
Yeah, I would probably suggest, because this is a kind of a breathing document at the moment, it's still in early draft phase, that the second meeting in June would probably be appropriate if there's
Okay.
no particular urgency. I mean, we do have till 2050, so we've got a little time.
But
If they're, the second meeting in June might be enough time for Peter and staff here to work out some of the details.
good.
And then, like Mr. Miller had indicated, then if there, because it's a resolution, advertisement for it is congruent with advertisement of the agenda itself. There's
Okay.
no 2-week requirement like you might see for some ordinances.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Is there a place where the public can view it? Is there a link or anything?
It was in our agenda, right?
Yeah, it was provided with the agenda packet, the draft that currently is.
Attachment number 26.
And Dave, could we put that on just in the news section of the website?
Sure.
Put the current wording and with the note that it may not be the final wording, that may change, but that would make it available to review. Yeah, that's where I'm getting to. So at this point, I will call, this is a motion to have staff draft the resolution for a later meeting. So all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries 4-1. And at this point, I'm going to call for a brief recess for
Thank
about
you.
5 minutes. It's better than me trying to whistle into the microphone. Figured the gavel's better than trying to whistle into the microphone. The whistle might be more effective.
Someone might, I'd be offended if you whistled at me, Steve.
Oh, sure you would. Okay, I'll call the meeting back to order. Next item on the agenda is a public hearing on a resolution of the Township of Ferguson, Center County, Pennsylvania, certifying provision of local match for state operating and capital financial assistance to the Center Area Transportation Authority and repealing Resolution 2016-21.
The board has with the agenda this evening a copy of the resolution. This is an annual resolution of the township, and it commits the operating funds for the 2017-2018 fiscal year in the amount of $103,144 and capital funding in the amount of $31,217 to the CATA budget. They run a July 1st through June 30th fiscal year, so it's not in congruence with the township's fiscal year, but the budget typically reflects the appropriate amounts. And last year's contributions were $99,012 for operating and $26,893 for capital funding. So this year's resolution does reflect that increase. The Executive Director of Center Area Transportation Authority, Luana Oliva, is here this evening if the board has any questions about the CATA operating or capital budgets.
Okay. And this is a public hearing, so if anybody cares to address the board, and everyone seems to have left, so or almost everyone. So I'll take a motion then.
I'd like to move that the Board of Supervisors adopt the resolution certifying the provision of local match for state operating and capital financial assistance to the Center Area Transportation Authority and repealing Resolution 2016-21.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Well, these are the numbers that we heard in the CATA discussions, so I think everybody knows pretty much where we are. And so, thanks for coming out, Luana, but I guess we don't have any questions for you.
Thank you.
This will be a roll call vote then.
This is presented as Resolution 2017-11. Mr. Buckland?
Yes.
Ms. Danini?
Yes.
Ms. Grafe?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes?
Ms. Whitaker?
Yes.
Okay, motion carries 5-0. Next item is a public hearing on a resolution of the Township of Ferguson, Center County, Pennsylvania, authorizing the submission of an application for a grant from the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation for the 2017-2018 Center County Sobriety Checkpoint and Expanded DUI Enforcement Program, and authorizing the Township Manager to sign all documents related to the grant on behalf of the Township of Ferguson.
Chief Conrad's going to introduce
Diane
this
will
one
do it,
for us.
Okay, so this is the grant that we've been putting in for many years. It's just for this year coming up. It's the same amount as last year, $43,435.30. The vast majority of it, which goes for overtime for roving targeted DUI patrols during our typical alcohol weekends that's typically centered around Penn State events, football, arts festival, things like that. It also covers replacement of our portable breath testers because they don't last forever, they get lots of use, and refresher training for the standardized field sobriety testing for officers. So as part of the state grant, of course, you have to, authorize us every year to apply for this on behalf of all the police departments in the county, although we manage it, and for the manager to sign on behalf.
Okay. And again, this is a public hearing. If anyone cares to address the board, seeing none.
I move that the Board of Supervisors adopt resolution authorizing the submission of an application for a grant from the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation 2017-2018 Center County Sobriety Checkpoint and Expanded DUI Enforcement Program, and authorizing the Township Manager to sign all documents related to the grant on behalf of the Township of Ferguson.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Okay, well, I have a little bit of discussion, and as I do annually, I will be voting against this because although I agree with most of the items in here, I don't like the checkpoints that pull people over randomly to check for DUI, and I don't like those. So that part of it I object to, so that's why I always vote against it.
Steve stuck in 1973, man.
Yes, yes I am.
It's not a bad time. So this is more than just that, though, right?
That's about
It's a small part.
1/18 of
Yeah.
what.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I do agree with the other items of
Yeah.
it, so.
Cool.
So is there any other discussion? No. Then this is a roll call vote.
This is presented as Resolution 2017-12. Ms. Denneny?
Yes.
Ms. Grafe?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
No?
Ms. Whitaker?
Yes.
Mr. Buckland?
Yes.
And motion carries 4-1. Okay, next item on the agenda is a public hearing on a resolution of the Township of Ferguson, Center County, Pennsylvania, amending Resolution 86-4 by designated David G. Pribolka as Chief Administrative Officer of the Ferguson Township Police and Employees Pension Plans, effective May 26, 2017.
This is a requirement of Pennsylvania Act 205, which governs municipal pensions, that an appointee be designated as the chief administrative officer of both uniform and non-uniform pension funds. Position's typically been occupied by the township manager. It grants the CAO, in this case, the authority to supervise the preparation of actuarial reports that are relative to the plan, determine financial requirements of the plan based on those actuarial reports, and determine what is referred to as the MMO, or the minimum municipal obligation of the township with respect to funding the plan for any given year.
I'll move that the Board of Supervisors adopt the resolution designating David G. Pribolka as Chief Administrative Officer of the Ferguson Township Police Pension Plan and Employees Pension Plan, effective May 26, 2017.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll need a roll call vote.
This is presented as Resolution 2017-13. Ms. Grafe?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Ms. Whitaker?
Yes.
Mr. Buckland?
Yes.
Ms. Denneny?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. Next item is the Gwinnett subdivision time extension request.
So,
Ray?
Dave, go ahead, Ray.
Sure, the Gwinnett subdivision was submitted in October. The Board of Supervisors conditionally approved the plan on November 21st. Since that time, there have been 3 time extensions due to the fact that we were awaiting the DEP module to be approved for sewage planning. In the meantime, Half Moon Township required that a subdivision submission be required as part of their review for the subdivision plan process and also for DEP's module approval. We're now approaching a 4th time extension. Staff anticipates that by May 20th, we would be receiving a copy of the fully signed subdivision plan from Half Moon, and also for our purposes to have signed for the approval of the subdivision. In hand, I have a copy of the a DEP approval between Ferguson Township and Half Moon for that subdivision. So we're looking to just grant one more extension for the subdivision at this time.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, this is something that normally would be in the consent agenda, but because 3 extensions are pretty much automatic, but this is the 4th extension, we have it on the agenda for a separate vote. So is there any discussion or a motion?
I'd like to move that the Board of Supervisors approve the 4th time extension for the Gwinnett subdivision.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Sounds pretty straightforward, so. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Motion carries. At this point, I think I'm going to insert the discussion of the official map, because 2/3 of our audience is here for that topic. Or I'm assuming you're here for that topic.
Here for the whole meeting.
Oh, okay. But this will, we'll have Lindsay present that now, so.
Thank you.
I think we have a.
You just hold up
Can you guys just pass this around? We can do that too.
Give me spyglass. You can get all this great crumbling sound.
I have a copy.
Short
Are you-
we'll have one up there.
Yes. Is it because the light doesn't
It,
come on?
it takes time for the light to heat up.
Oh, okay.
The projector to get ready. But then again,
Technical difficulties are occurring
Is the ball one?
for the audience's awareness.
No, the ball.
Oh.
There's no bulb on there?
It doesn't look bright.
Doesn't look bright. Okay.
Doesn't seem bright from this side either.
Light bright.
It worked before.
Oh.
I don't know, I feel like if I keep pushing the button, it'll eventually
Yeah.
turn on. It's
Maybe
probably
not,
It's
though.
probably not a fair assumption.
Okay.
we may need a public works person here.
Oh,
There
no.
we go.
We just
Oh,
needed to have
wow.
Dave walk through the door.
Dave just had to threaten.
That's right.
It's time for the backup. So no, I can do it, I swear.
Okay, so thanks, everyone. This is proposed to be on the agenda for June 5th. We hope for a authorization for advertising for a public hearing, but since it's been pulled from Ray's report, I just want to go over some of the changes that we've made to the official map since the last time you've seen it, which was back in February, on February 21st. This is hot off the press today. We've had Allie Day, our GIS technician, helping a lot with the legend and some of the symbology on the map. But some of the bigger changes, I guess, would be this area here around Whitehall Road Regional Park. We added that to the map as a result of the public outreach meeting that was held at the Ferguson Township building on April 13th. That land was added to the map for potential parkland acquisition for passive recreation. That's really the most major change that has been made to the map since the last time you've seen it, other than a lot of, I guess, artistic stuff. But we did also add the historical landmark that we have in Ferguson Township, which is out here, the Butcher Ayers Farm. We also moved the fire station as a result of the public workshop, moved it a little bit farther away from the existing farmhouse that stands there now, about 100 feet away. We also included all of the agricultural easements that we have in the township, and those are now most recent. Actually, the Coral Farm, I believe, that's here surrounding Pine Grove Mills, is probably going to be closed on Friday. So we included.
Campbell.
Oh, Campbell, yes, thanks, Ray, Campbell Farm. That's going to be closed on Friday, so the county ag planner asked us to add that to the map since it'll be in preservation by the time this map gets adopted. We also added our existing sidewalks within the township and included the trails that go through the parks in the township, which weren't on there before. So if you see up in here, you can see how the trail systems go through the parks in the township. We included the Musser Gap Trail, the entire thing that starts up here and then goes, it's the Musser Gap, it's named correctly now on the map. There's the Musser Trail and then the Musser Gap Trail. The Musser Greenway, actually, I believe, connects Whitehall Road down through to 45, and then across 45 is the Musser Gap Trail. So that's shown on the map as well. And we also showed the differences between lands that are actually in ag preservation and the lands that are proposed to be in ag preservation, but we kept the ag security areas off.
Could you say that again? You did not include ag preservation?
We
ag
didn't include ag
rather?
security areas. So
But that's an overlay on another
yes,
map?
We're proposing that for the map room that we will have eventually in the township. So we just show the ones that are actually purchased or very close pending purchase. Oh, yes. So one of the things, thanks Ray, so right here in this property, if you see, it's kind of hard.
Are you able to zoom in at all?
Yeah, maybe.
If you can zoom in, Dave, to Nixon Road where the ag easements are on each side, yeah. So if you can see, we have a proposed facility that connects their Old Gatesburg down South Nixon Road to 45. We had some concerns from some folks in the ag community that that's not a permitted use when your farm is preserved. So you can't have a bike lane established when the farm there is on both sides of the street. And as you see, it's that there and that over there, those two areas. So we talked with Sarah Walters today from the county planning office. She's the ag planner. And there's been some new legislation passed that will allow it, but it has to be a part of a road widening project. So if the road is projected or proposed to be widened, then a bike facility can be added, a shared use path or just a bike lane. So that's if we wanted to see this happen in the future. I mean, it would still have to go through the process, and we would have actually have to do pay the county's ag program back a little for that land if we did take it. So, but it is an option.
That proposed bike lane came out of the 2015 regional bike plan as well, correct, Lindsay?
Yes, all of the proposed facilities that you see on the map did come from the bike plan, but we did take off a lot of the proposed facilities that were in smaller or in developments on lower classification roads. Because we met with Public Works and we went through everything that was on existing RPOS plans, on our existing official map, our old official map, and what was in the bike plan, and decided what we're going to keep and what we're going to take away. So this is a result of that. And then once this is adopted, we will be able to amend the 2015 bike plan to update it so it can be consistent with our official map.
Mr. Chairman, might we ask, for the sake of the community that's listening to the discussion, for just kind of a little bit of background? Because Ferguson Township has on their website a number of maps, including the township official map, and this is proposed, and a zoning map. So we should make sure that folks know this is not a zoning map, that it's an official map. Could you just help us kind of know how this map is used?
Sure. This is an ordinance So it comes, it has some text that goes along with it. And this map just shows areas in the township that the township may want to acquire in the future. So parkland, roads, we could, like the fire station, if that's on the official map and someone proposes a development in that area, then the township has 1 year to acquire that land from that landowner. It's not a zoning map, but it is a ordinance and a document that just is kind of the layout for what the township really wants or could purchase in the future. And it does show all of the existing parks too, HOA parks. Does that kind of explain it for you?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair Miller. So I have a couple questions about the map, but I just wanted to build on what Rita was asking about, and because I also was along for the learning in this, and I thought that your presentations at the open houses really helped people that did attend those open houses, which I think weren't even required, but you just did them to help people publicly comment if they wanted to, because it was advertised and they could do that. But your presentations that were there really helped me understand the nuance of the tool that we're talking about. And it's really hard until you read like this publication that's by PennDOT, PADCNR, PADCED, and another organization I'm not familiar with, PALTA, and you really just kind of learn about examples where this is used. You can't really, I think, really wrap your head around it. So I was going to read just a quote or two out of this publication, also for the public and for the board, so you know, when we're dialoguing about this, we understand fully what we're dialoguing about, and you can correct me if I'm interpreting this wrongly. So the official map, the power has been granted by the state of Pennsylvania to municipalities to use something called an official map as a planning tool. And the planning tool is really to help landowners and the municipality dialogue about shared goals. And so when a lot of folks really have maybe a reaction to the official map, and you know, it is something we are stating our goals up here. So perhaps a landowner that sees one of our goals is to put a fire station on another property, maybe that makes them nervous. But just going to read this quote, because typically, because it's a tool to dialogue about shared goals, typically eminent domain is not used in conjunction with the official map. It's something that's a negotiation and a dialogue. So I just will read the quote from page 18 of this publication. While the use of eminent domain has sometimes been proven necessary, and it is authorized in this, for full project implementation, particularly in projects involving multiple properties, say the one in the middle is the holdout, its use has been relatively rare in conjunction with official maps. And I think that that really helps illustrate part of why it's more about dialoguing about shared goals than we want this and we're going to take it. So that was kind of the understanding that I developed through this. And so, so for example, like you said about the fire station, it was over here, then we shifted it over there. The landowner seems to be amenable to that, and so we're moving forward maybe with that if we choose that we're going to pass this map eventually. So.
Okay. Any other?
I have some map questions specific to the map too.
Okay.
I only have one.
Okay, go for it.
Yeah, is there a reason that state-owned land isn't designated on the official map?
I think throughout the discussions when we had presented drafts, it was decided, I think when we discussed with the Planning Commission, that the state game lands and state forest lands would be better served on a map that we can provide in the map room. as state ownership. I think even Penn State lands came up in one of our meetings and thought that would be a more appropriate location for a map. But I know other municipalities have used that data within their official map. I believe College Township has university-owned lands, but I think they have far more university-owned lands than Ferguson does.
Great, thank you.
My specific questions about the map, I think that that's the McWilliams property that's to the left of the Whitehall Regional. Did you dialogue with the county, with Sarah at all about that potential passive parkland designation? I'm not sure if that's Mr. McWilliams' property or not. It would be that long parcel to the left of Whitehall Regional.
This here?
Not that's
Oh,
Mr.
this one
Homan,
here.
that, yeah.
No, I have not yet spoken with Sarah about that property.
Because my understanding is he is interested in that parcel being used for, agriculture and that kind of a use. So I think we would have shared goals, but I think just reaching out to him in terms of that would be good. Did you all, I know that Mr. Homan has been having some trouble with some water running off through his property. And actually, this map right here, I can pass it around to the board. It shows why one might anticipate that as being the case, because the waterway of the upper collector branch of Slab Cabin, that blue line actually used to run further, like on this map. Anyway, I know that he has some sort of partial right-of-way or something has been granted to the township up in that area of his parcel. Is this something that this would be an appropriate tool to work with him to help something like mitigate his water problems, do something with MS4 stormwater? No. Is Dave saying no about that? Okay. All right.
Yeah, I had a question on the park designation that we have there. What sort of things would trigger the ability of the 1-year timeline for the township? That's all agricultural land. So if somebody put in a proposal to build a barn there, would that?
A zoning permit would trigger the 1 year. Any type of subdivision land development plan would also trigger that as well.
Okay. So essentially, any change to that property would trigger?
For the most part, yes.
Okay. And so I guess my question on that is, are we really considering a 400-acre park or whatever that is, 300-acre? Or are we using this as a tool for something other than what we're stating we're using it for? We're stating that we're using this for a 300-acre park. And I guess the question is, do we really anticipate putting a 300-acre park there in a place where we're getting a lot of resistance to a 100-acre park?
To build on that, Steve, I was going to actually ask for a distinction between parkland versus water resource preservation, which is, I know, another designation that we can make on the official map. And I didn't know what the decision, I know what the person was saying about preserving that to save the water, but I didn't know what the staff process was in terms of deciding passive parkland versus resource preservation. And to Steve, to answer your question in terms of policy, my understanding is for at least 2 years now, a lot of residents have been talking about preserving that for resource preservation. And that was the argument that was used in the Musser Gap preservation, that's to this side of that, and that was the argument that was used in the Clearwater preservation, that's to this side of that. So, that's where that dialogue is coming from. So in terms of, do we really want to save 300 acres? I think it's a resounding yes.
No, that's not my question, is do we want to save it?
Oh.
The question is, do we want to turn that into a park?
Oh,
which is
and
what we
that's-
have designated this to be.
Right.
And if we want to keep it in agriculture, we don't rezone from agriculture. If we want to keep it as a park, or if we want to make a park there, we designate a park on the official map.
Well, just to actually, we actually in Whitehall Road Regional Park, that is zoned RA, and it is a park. So designating that as passive parkland, it could stay RA.
Right. Yeah, but I'm just saying that, my question is there really an intention of putting a park there? Is that the intention of this board if we adopt this map, of putting a park there?
When it was dialogued about, yes, the intent was any passive use would protect the water, and a passive park would allow resident access when you're spending their tax dollars for it. You want to allow access, and that came out of the dialogue about Clearwater and College Township, and so, I mean.
But where I see the difference between Musser Gap and the Eberhard is those are not government actions, which would be, I mean, even though eminent domain isn't normally used, this would be subject to eminent domain. The Musser Gap was a purchase by entities that came up with money to buy the land as an agreement with the landowner. The easement is an agreement between, I mean, it's not something that is part of an official action by a municipality, whereas something on the official map is an official action by the municipality. So they're very different things in terms of.
Well, the tool is different, but the intent is the same.
But I'm speaking of what the official map is intended for, which is to designate something that we want to do there. So, Peter.
Yeah, so one question, so would designating that as potential parkland interfere with a landowner's ability to put it into an easement?
To place a conservation easement
Yes.
on their property if
Yes.
they were accepted by that
Yeah,
program?
like, do we have a year to try to, like, if we had this designation, would we have a year to, like, interfere with that?
So that may be the case. I think that in the past, to get back to the question about sort of what triggers that year countdown clock, we would lean on the solicitor to provide us with some guidance. So if one of these farms or these tracts were proposed to be preserved under the county preservation program and it were accepted into that program, it very well might trigger a opportunity for the township's right of first refusal on that piece of land. So that if the township, I'll use an example. Steve White's property behind with the Waffle Shop was the last area that was designated by the township as natural area conservation on the 2008 version of the official map. When Mr. White proposed the land to be developed into I believe a charter school, it was the opinion of the solicitor that 1 year began. So in order to protect that from development, in this case, eminent domain was used to acquire the property because a agreeable compensation couldn't be reached between the property owner and the township. I would think, and I'm not an attorney, but a similar process may be established for these properties if they're accepted into the preservation program. The township may want to protect them from even agricultural activities if it were identified as natural area conservation that had some sort of environmental significance that the board may not want to see active ag operations take place on. There would be an opportunity for the board to acquire that property and preserve it for its natural benefits.
And basically, the further the goals are apart, the less likely it is that you're going to be able to come to a solution that is agreeable for all parties.
Yeah. I mean, so one of the things that is a little bit, we know, so there are citizens who very much want this land to just be put into preservation in perpetuity. I'm totally sympathetic to that. I would love that. I myself approached David Gray, the Senior Vice President of Finance and Business about putting them into an easement about 2 years ago. That whatever is happening with that is, obviously we're not privy to those conversations. I guess the thing that concerns me about this designation is, and this is a statement of total ignorance, from total ignorance, is can or will a designation on the official map like that, this one, interfere with somehow the university's ability to do that as the landowner? And I'm just honestly saying, I don't know. And I would prefer that it not.
My understanding is that's 100% up to us. So what would happen is if the landowner said, my understanding from reading this and learning about it, is that if the landowner wanted to do something that was consistent with the township's goals, it would be not fiscally responsible for the township to continue to move on acquiring that parcel. Because if it's consistent with the goals and the landowner is meeting those goals, then there would be no reason to move on it. So if our goal is to have this be in passive or agricultural use, and that would be the dialogue that we would eventually have about it, and the landowner would make a move to achieve a goal that was consistent with that, then the board would be really obligated to not spend the taxpayers' money to meet the same goal that the landowner would have met. And so that's my understanding as to why the official map doesn't necessarily result in an eminent domain action. In the case of Mr. White, my understanding is that the land was so porous there, this is where they call it the sponge, I believe, and his development plan was so developed that there was no way to get to the meeting point where something could be worked out. So I don't think it would, in practical means, bar them from doing something that would be consistent with the stated goals of why we placed it on the map in the first place.
Right. But I think...
It would bar them from a non-consistent thing, however, because then we would want to act on it.
I think, Mr. Chair, I think that back to your question then is, if this is a proxy for something else, then why use a proxy that it doesn't really indicate what you actually want, and that there may be a designation that perhaps, the university may find more amenable, given the sort of the shared goals. I mean, folks at the Water Authority, for example, would like it to be in an easement. We know that. I think that this board probably would as well, many members of the public, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe there's a different designation that indicates our intent that can get us to a more productive conversation than, the use of the park. And I would really love that.
And my understanding from reading this document, which is so recommended and amazing, is, and that's why I asked Lindsay and staff for their rationale on why selecting passive parkland. And I don't know if I read this correctly, but it does seem that if you designate it for resource preservation, you've got a little bit more clout in terms of eminent domain, whereas if it's passive parkland, two things. One, you're ensuring that there's going to be a public access component, and if we're using tax dollars, maybe we want to make sure to do that. And two, it seemed to be more of a dialogue. And I don't know, I'm just totally going from what I learned in this document, and I don't know if that was at all what you guys were thinking, or if you had something else.
Well, this property was placed on the map as a result of our meeting that evening.
Right.
And since it was discussed as being potential parkland or passive parkland, that's why it was designated that way on the map.
And we're fairly literal with what was given to us.
Cool.
At that point. But I think it's...
But it's still a draft. It's going to be a draft until it's adopted, so any changes are welcome.
And our next meeting will be a discussion of this, where we can make changes to this map if we so wanted, or adopt, or move forward either way. But
Can I just ask a process question with regards to properties, these that are highlighted on this close-up or elsewhere, that have changed their designation in any way? I know that we've had public meetings, but have we notified those property owners and had a conversation with them about our potential intent that may be expressed in making these changes and what their intent for the properties might be in the future? So that maybe we find out they're the same thing, but have we had that conversation?
Well, this came up, this was presented at CRPC, the meeting last, well, I guess on May 4th. And this was the first time that anyone had visually seen this version of the map. So the big change about, the big change of the parkland, or the land around Whitehall Road Regional Park was shown then. And so that came up in the, out of the letter that they sent to us for recommendation. They brought that part up about potential parkland acquisitions, and then we spoke with some folks from Penn State about it, and I believe they want to show up at the meeting in June to discuss it further or could show us any concerns. We also did receive a letter from Penn State opposing the purchase, or placing it on the plan, as Ray indicated in his report a little earlier tonight.
But really, just kind of the short answer to the question is no. The individual property owners whose properties have been designated either for future acquisition or passive parkland or natural area conservation, staff hadn't done any direct outreach to those property owners. And I think there's probably a number of reasons. To use the fire station as an example, that the exact location of that is really to be determined. So to reach out to the property owner and say, you know, we're placing this designation on the map, it may or may not be where the actual, you know, property or the actual fire station is proposed to be developed. I think that might be a presumptive conversation that's really a little bit too early to really have an effective discussion about. It may, you know, trigger some questions from the landowner that the township's not in a position yet to respond to. And I think as Ms. Denini had correctly indicated earlier, this really is a planning tool that is very early in its infancy. I mean, decisions haven't been made on these properties. There's been no specific conversation about, you know, whether it be a declaration of taking or an actual conversation with the property owner, or how that transaction might materialize. So there's just too many unknowns, really, to do direct outreach to the property owners. I think we have heard some feedback from the university, and they've requested a discussion with staff. So we'll have that meeting probably as well. And ultimately, it's going to be up to the board to, you know, give direction regarding whether you're interested in proceeding with this designation, not just here, but any other property that's proposed to be developed or acquired by the township within the scope of this version of the official map.
And I just wanted to say that I was, the letter from Penn State hit me a little bit wrong, because our staff went above and beyond in terms of what's laid out in the Pennsylvania Municipalities Planning Code for official map process. So I just want to say that while I understand that Penn State seemed to be taken by surprise by this dialogue, one, they probably shouldn't have, given the dialogue that's been going on in Ferguson Township. And two, our staff went above and beyond the call of duty in this. And then lastly, I'd like to say, if we as a township want to talk about informing landowners at an earlier part in the process, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but we, I think, could put that in our own official map ordinance. Like, I think that we could add something in here in the future if we wanted to, in terms of requirements for that, but I don't know if that's true or not. If that was, you know, a goal that we wanted to.
We did, the planning, it was a recommendation of our planning commission that we hold to at least 2 public outreach meetings. So we did hold one here at the township, and a week later we held it at Baileyville. So we got a pretty big turnout at the Baileyville community, and about 5 residents here, so that was helpful.
Thanks for your time. I have one more quick
Okay,
thing,
one
Chair,
more.
super quick. Thanks for bringing up other designations, because I just recall that on the other official map, the 2008, I mean, the current one, there is a designation of parkland acquisition within the TTD. And it's been removed from this map. And I'm just wondering if the board also wants to talk about, I mean, that as a tool for dialogue with the potential, with the current landowner and the potential landowner. So,
Is
just
that
putting that
something
out
we
there.
can do when there's land development, or a master plan in place? Or
Only because it's already there, I think. That designation is on the current map, right?
The designation, there's a block of land on the 2008 official map. However, if I think back on the originally approved Pine Hall master plan, I don't necessarily know if that is designated on the master plan as a recreation area.
Okay, I see. Okay, gotcha. Thanks. Good enough.
Yeah, so at this point, I think we'll
Thank
wrap
you.
this discussion up, because we will have at least 2 more discussions. And if property owners care to come to those, we'll advertise them and make it clear that those are on the agenda. So I think we'll wrap this one up for now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Move to the next item.
Thank you
Thanks,
so much
Lindsay.
for your work.
Okay, next item on the agenda is a zoning variance for JL Farms. Do you ready?
Sure. Dr. John Leclerc owns 3392 Shingletown Road, containing approximately 31 acres with an existing home, multiple greenhouses, an apple orchard, vineyard, a proposed cidery. Dr. Leclerc submitted a land development plan back on February 24th for the proposed cidery, which will also include a new parking area with handicap parking space to support a proposed tasting room. Dr. Leclerc applied for a zoning variance under section 2780715, flexible buffer yard, which would require a 15-foot buffer along the perimeter of the property. The applicant identifies that a large natural buffer exists that includes woods, tree lines surrounding a majority of the property. That hearing will be next Tuesday.
Okay, and the question for us is, do we want to take a position on it or remain neutral?
I move that we remain neutral on the variance application for the JL Cidery, JL Farms, at JL Farms.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Motion carries. Next item, the Fox White Planned Residential Development request for modification has been withdrawn by the applicant. Then we have Whitehall Road Regional Park Project and financing. Actually, Rita had asked that this be placed on the agenda. I'm listed as lead because the Finance Committee connection, since I was at the meeting and Rita wasn't. I'm not sure if you have more beyond what I'm going to go
I
with.
wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to
Yeah.
talk about it now that we
Right,
have
because-
all of the information.
Yeah, this will be coming up at the COG meeting next week, is the financing of the loan. Our consultant negotiated with Fulton Bank. The offer from Fulton Bank reduces the interest rate to, I believe, 2.59%, reduces the required draw to $167,000 from the full amount. And so, as a result, there are really only 2 options that we need to consider, whether to, because the third option was to draw down all the money and then continue paying under the old terms. Well, we have better terms now than what that drawdown will be. So the options are to either, and this is a recommendation to the Parks Authority, to either pay off the loan at this point and apply for a new loan later if the Whitehall Road Regional Park goes forward, or to revise the terms of the loan to the new agreement with the lower interest rate. So the question before COG will be, which option do we want to recommend to the Parks Authority? As Janet reported earlier, the Parks Capital Committee and the Finance Committee both voted 3-2 to revise the terms, or recommend revising the terms of the loan. So that was and that is what will be coming up next week for us to decide on. And I guess if there's any other information that anybody needs, I can try to provide it, or. Anything?
Discussing?
Yeah, we can have discussion at this point, yeah.
Everybody's looking my way.
Yeah.
Would you like me to start? Does anybody else have anything that they wanted to say?
I think you look like you're ready to discuss.
Well, I wasn't sure if you were going to say discuss. I wasn't sure what was coming
No,
next.
this is open for discussion. This is,
Okay.
this is
Okay, well, I
time
guess
to do it.
the thing that we're discussing is, do we want to close the loan or not? And if not, the terms that Mr. Gibbons has negotiated would be the terms.
Right. Those are.
So I think that when I think about buying things in my own personal life, I think about what am I buying, not just how much I want to spend or how I want to spend it or when I want to spend it, but what I'm going to spend it on. And so when I look at this decision and I see what I would be spending this money on, I would choose to not spend this money on that. And I think that the vote of 3-2, 3-2 on the two boards that passed this recommendation indicates that others feel similarly, and despite the fact that it passed, there's quite a bit of dissent about whether to move forward. And I think that I would echo some of those concerns, one being moving forward at this time, signing contracts and negotiating terms to provide infrastructure to a park that may be provided by a developer is not something that a lot of elected officials feel all that comfortable with, because they feel like when they signed onto this money, it was for the park amenities, not for the sewer, electric, water, and other infrastructure costs. So when I think about spending that same amount of money and getting an 18th or something, I don't know what proportion of what was originally anticipated, it doesn't make me feel like a very good guardian of the taxpayer dollars. And my understanding is that if we did not recommend this, that the park authority could slow down a little bit, that we could always renegotiate a loan. And if they were to slow down a bit, it could provide an opportunity to find out what the intent of Penn State is after the court decision, and have more of a dialogue about, I guess, terms for our taxpayers. So I'll start with that.
Okay.
I definitely would like to continue the dialogue, but I would love to hear from some other folks as well.
Okay, I would say one thing is, I'm not sure that the votes against were necessarily saying that they didn't want the park as it's proposed. I think the question was, is it likely to go forward anytime soon? And I think the concern was more of keeping the loan active if it's not going to move, rather than not wanting a park there. I think Patton Township clearly stated that they support the park going forward, but they are reluctant to borrow the money at this point, or keep the loan open at this point, not knowing whether it's going to go forward or not, or anytime soon. And I think that was the similar, Mr. Lord expressed a similar concern from Harris Township as well. So I'm not sure that it was a question of not wanting the park to go forward, but not wanting to have the loan open and paying interest on it if it isn't going to go forward soon.
I think that was definitely part of it.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, I think when the motion was made to just extend it for a year, I think it might have covered some of what you just said, Steve. It was kind of like a compromise.
I think so,
Yeah.
But-
And,
But it wasn't
my-
enough to convince.
Yeah, my personal take on
George.
it is, if the loan should be closed, then I don't think it's ever going to come back on the table. Whereas, there's so many unknowns and so many uncertainties right now. And I think of the money that's been spent in the past, I just feel like we should probably just, keep it on the table and hopefully hope that in this next year there will be some decisions. But I know the courts are slow, I know, but it gives us just a little more leeway, and then we're going to revisit it in a year. That's the way I looked at that motion when it was made. Hopefully that was correct.
I guess I need to clarify a little bit about that motion. I did speak with Jim Steff after that meeting because I was attempting to clarify exactly the meaning of that. And my understanding is that similarly to the senior center, where we have severed our, I guess we have given away our power to, make contracts in terms of parks, but we have reserved our obligation to pay for those contracts. So similarly, my understanding is, similarly to what happened with the senior center, where the authority had the full authority and right to sever a contract, before asking the general forum if they would accept any additional costs involved in all of with transitioning that senior center. They had the ability to sever that contract, and then COG was really kind of obligated to either pay the costs of the new contract that was identified and signed by the authority, or just say, well, we don't care about the senior center anymore. So it really kind of backed us a bit into a corner. And so my understanding that I reflected to Jim Steff after the meeting was that the way that motion was worded, that it would give I know they already have the authority already has the authority, but it would give our blessing of them to move forward with signing contracts and initiating partnerships before anything else is determined. So I would like clarification on that, because that isn't what I just heard Janet say.
No, I believe that's true, that they have that right now to move forward, and
This is our sanctioning of that, our blessing.
I guess you could put it that way. I'm not sure exactly what the motion accomplishes. I think that unless the authority does not have, unless the COG has the right to pay off the loan, it really falls to the authority no matter what. So this is a recommendation to the authority. And I think that it's sort of a motion that does not do a whole lot.
Well, it does a lot because the authority has stated in public that they would take into account our position. So I would not say that it doesn't matter. What I'm trying to understand is the content of what we're blessing them for, or not blessing them, for lack of a better word.
The content of the motion is to recommend that the authority renegotiate the terms of the loan. or, not renegotiate, but accept the new terms of the loan, which is the lower interest rate and the new payout schedule, or drawdown schedule. That's the only thing that's changing.
So where is then the dialogue that we've been told that we were going to have for so long about whether we think as an elected official that this is actually meeting what the intent was of the regional parks? When do we have that dialogue? Because that's related to the value, whether we want to move forward, whether it would just die or come back. I think that that's almost the more important dialogue to have. And so, that's what informs.
Right.
If I may chime in,
Please.
my understanding is that the question at hand most immediately is whether or not to accept or support these more favorable terms, so that financially this loan gets renegotiated, or we let it lapse, we pay off the terms of the loan. And with regard to the options that are available to us to discuss at this point as to what this park might look like, there have been presentations at our last COG meeting, forgive me, I don't remember the date, but the last meeting in April, and then some subsequent documents that the regional parks has been working with an advisory group to identify number of rectangular fields, what kind of amenities, and that group has recommended option 1A, and I don't have that number or that illustration in front of me, but it's out there in the documents. Additionally, the Center Regional Park staff is, at the same time that they're waiting on the decision for whether or not the court hearing provides an answer as to whether or not the road and the traffic survey and intersection might be handled by a developer that this park unfortunately got hitched to. They have retooled the budget in that phase 1A to identify what amenities are available in addition to the road and basic services to that space. And that budget was actually included in the initial phasing and cost detail that was provided, I want to say 2011 document, but don't quote me on that, that the Parks Capital has looked at and that we have looked at here as a board. Without the loan to support further study that needs to happen to consider any of these options, the project will stop.
No, they said in the meeting that you weren't at that they could draw funds to move it forward.
No, they
I
said
believe,
that-
let me rephrase that. I believe that if this loan were closed out, that there would require funding support from the municipalities and a vote to make that happen. And additionally, if the park were decided to go forward after these studies were done outside of the loan, there would have to be a new loan renegotiated. And I think as Janet has indicated, that would be a really hard row to tow, or a rope to pull. And I think that the park staff should be allowed to continue to explore, unhitched from the developer, what options are available to us to build out this park. And
I don't know that we have all of the answers to have a robust discussion about what this park looks like, because I think that it is a phased conversation, and there are multiple inputs that are being worked through, which include independent fundraising, grant writing, and, you know, the question of whether or not a developer might build that road, and that would free up additional budget.
I'm sorry, I misspoke. Actually, to clarify, my understanding at that meeting was that they could pull out some of the loan to cover those kinds of study costs when they closed it. So they could pull an additional 150,000 or something.
I don't think that was actually discussed as such, but that may be, that may be.
Actually, there was some chatter, but one of the electeds was discussing that.
Okay.
And, so we could, as a bridge, so as opposed to paying all of the interest that was dialogued about, we could pull out some money and still close the loan without necessarily putting this hard stop on it like you're fearful of.
Yeah, I had one other thought on this, as far as, I think a lot of the concern with other municipalities is that I believe, or my feeling is that the 1A option is somewhat acceptable to everyone. I think some are more behind it than others, but I think that the real hitch has been that the cost of the road is really taking away from the park amenities. And I guess that I'm wondering if it would be possible for Ferguson Township to build that road as a, because the road under what the study has been gets to the, you have to have prevailing wage. And so I'm just wondering, thinking there would be a possibility if we were to do that as an access, because ultimately that would be a township road when it was finished, if that might be a way to address the questions that some of the other municipalities have. I don't know if that's practical or not, but.
It's food for thought, though. It's a good idea.
I think it's
I don't know.
I
Gotta
think
think
it's
about
pretty
it.
impractical, and it kind of flies in the face of what these regional parks are supposed to be about. And frankly, if Penn State had given us a parcel over there where they're going to sell off that parcel that's going to have Fox Point Drive go through it, it's very
I'm talking about going
costly.
forward.
We're burdening our taxpayers with so many costs because we were sold this property at a low price so that we would be incentivized to talk about developing the watershed. And because the property owner knew that the intent for that was to never be developed. So what better way than to get us to consider to develop it? And as we sat in that meeting, Steve, people were advocating for the development of the watershed against what the citizens want because they're so desperate for these amenities. And really, it's just not fair that we've been put into this kind of a situation. And I think the absolute last thing that we want to do is to continue to dig ourselves into that hole.
No, I don't see it as digging ourselves into a hole.
see it as a hole.
We own 100 acres of land. We have a master plan for it that is phased. We don't have a road leading down to it because that got tied to another project. And what I am proposing is that we build the road down to it as the gravel road that's been proposed.
Steve, it didn't get tied to another project. The project was tied to it for purpose.
I was on the board at the time. Those were not tied together. Those were separate things.
Steve, I have the documents that have the timeline side by side in Ferguson Township's files. I vehemently disagree with you that those were not side by side. The 7-plot subdivision plan drew out the relationships between them with full intent. I'm sorry, but that is just not true, Steve.
Well, whether you believe it to be true or not.
It's
that
not what I
We
believe.
right now own 100 acres of land that the region has purchased for the purpose of building a park. I'm proposing a way to provide access to that 100 acres of land. That's all I'm talking about.
I think it's rather irresponsible to suggest that when it's probably in the millions.
I think that it's nowhere near a million. That's been studied already. We don't have a final number.
I think it's more like 350,000 or something like
Yeah.
that on the budget.
Yeah, it was.
Might be worth having staff take a look at it.
And then the Toll Brothers can use it.
And then the question would be whether,
Sure, our citizens will not like if we're building a road for Toll Brothers and the Whitehall Regional Park. They're not gonna like it.
this would not be a road for Toll Brothers, because if that development goes through, that has to become a paved road. That, what I'm talking about is what has been discussed in the parks capital meetings, is a gravel driveway down to the park. It's not a road that is part of a development. It's access to the park. And that's all it would be.
This is also in defiance of the definition of regional. For our purposes, regional their capital costs are funded by the region, and this is a capital cost of this park then. So no,
But there
the
is-
region should pay a portion of it.
But there's nothing that prevents Ferguson from adding to what we have.
Or offsetting our portion by making this contribution versus something else. I mean,
Well, Ferguson already spent the majority of the money for the land acquisition. We already paid more than our portion of the land acquisition. So why would we pay more than our portion of the access that's not even necessary to be paid for? It's not even necessary. Why would we offer that? I think it's fiscally irresponsible.
How do you mean it's not necessary?
It's not necessary for one single municipality to take on the debt that all of the municipalities agreed to, and now when this deal is going so sour, they're backpedaling on it. And with good right, with good cause, and we should be too. They're backpedaling because they don't think they should pay for the infrastructure for the park. Okay, and I agree with them, and I don't think that since they think they shouldn't, that we think we should pay it all. That's the most absurd reasoning I've ever heard in terms of fiscal responsibility. I'm sorry, with all due respect.
May I?
Please.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things that really bother me about the loan. I myself am in favor of just walking away from the loan. I mean, I'll just say that right up front. No need to beat around the bush. And it's really for two reasons. One, while I certainly recognize the demand for good space for people to play, and I will also recognize that the growth boundary was changed and put around this parcel, right? I recognize that. I think this is a terrible place to put that park. I think it's absolutely awful. I very much want good regional competition level team sports to be happening here, somewhere else. That's one. Number two is that the strange tendrilless, multiplying, ballooning costs of this park only aggravate my dislike of the park to begin with. So when looking at, well, we could do this and we could do that, and you stack on, what was it? I don't have the document in front of me, and I do apologize for not remembering, but it's something like $2.3 million more dollars or something like that, so that we end up with a $7 million park that wouldn't even have all of the thing.
The number is 800,000
No.
above the budget.
When
For
there were,
Phase 1A.
When.
Without artificial
when-
turf, which is
when-
not what they're going
Yes,
for.
that's what I'm talking about. When you add artificial turf,
But they're privately fundraising.
I understand. that.
With no guarantees, and also the region elected officials are very concerned about that, because now, well, Ferguson Township is going to be building a road to a park that special interest groups that number in 2,000 people, not to say that doesn't matter, it certainly matters, will have primary, and we don't know the terms, and we won't know the terms, and we have no power over negotiating the terms. So once we decide this, all of those terms, like, they could just be decided out of our hands, and then we would be obligated to go with them. So
So-
we would then have agreed to build a road to a park that very few people could then use.
Right. So as I was saying, the escalating costs to benefit a few people, I mean, hundreds of children, I understand. No, I recognize that. I don't want our municipality to continue to keep paying for something that has been kicked down the road again and again and again and again and again. And perhaps it is just my own level of frustration, but I'm just really frustrated with this thing, and I would like it to go somewhere else. That's all. It's very simple for me.
Well, I guess the real question we have, and I don't know if we even need to answer it tonight, but we can, if the board wants to, is where do we stand as far as the motion will be before COG next week, because that will be going forward.
You want me to start? I'm for it because I want the park. I want the park.
Right. And I'm not.
Yeah, I am, and Laura's not.
I'm not, but I just did want to add, in terms of fiscal responsibility, I have a lot of concerns about how we are putting the cart before the horse, and also in a time where if we didn't rush it, we would also probably find out more information about federal and state cuts to a county budget and our budgets and that kind of thing. And just in terms of, I would hope that you all would join me in just slowing things down a little for the rest of the litigation to catch up with us, and for the rest of the state and federal cuts that we anticipate coming into our budgets to sort of be more well-known. So yes, I'm against it. Even though I very much support the development of these types of assets in an appropriate place, and I would very much lobby for, in the comprehensive plan of parks, for us to identify that as a very high priority.
So I have been identified as a tiebreaker.
By who, Rita? You say that, and nobody that I know of has identified you that. I'm sorry, but that troubles me, because that implies that we are already pre-decided and not deliberative.
That was exactly what I was going to say. Thank
Awesome. Thank you.
Some of my fellow board members and citizens have discussed the notion that I came on the board and there is a sentiment going into any discussions with regards to property around this park and around the Toll Brothers cottages property, that there is some predisposition in board members as to where they may make their decisions. And I have to say, as you articulated, that is frustrating, because I firmly believe that as an effective elected official, that one needs to consider all of the things before us before truly making a decision. Now, granted, you bring baggage with you at any time to the table in terms of your experience, your knowledge, and all of that. But the reality is the decision in front of us right now is only whether or not to negotiate better terms on a loan. And I would support the COG or Center Region Park Authority doing so that the loan would remain open, that we would have more amenable terms, and we could continue our conversation about this park. I also believe, since I have the floor, that any discussion, we need to be very conscious about whether or not we're hitching our conversations and preferences to another development when we're talking about the Whitehall Road Regional Park. In my understanding, this park would provide needed field space that would help offset use on other parkland, and it's a phased development, so it will take 10 or 12 years to fully build it out. But that property is something that we have ownership of, and it's designated as a park. And I actually think it's not in a bad location with access to residential development that could access that area, and it forms a gateway to state parkland through the Musser Trail System. Further, I think that we should be looking potentially at other acquisitions around that space, not necessarily what we were talking about with the official map, but just in front of or between the Whitehall Road Regional Park and Blue Course Drive is the Water Authority. And that could be a passive use park space as well that would further welcome residents' use of that parkland. So I would vote to support the loan going forward, which would allow the authority and staff to continue their work. I believe that the authority and staff had slowed the pace and considered very carefully and in much thoroughness with advisory committees and input from a lot of folks around the COG and citizen use groups, as they're making their decisions about what is right for this park space. I think we need to allow them the opportunity to do that, and we will, as a COG and as a municipality, have before us the details of what may or may not go forward. But I don't think we should cut it off at its knees at this point.
I have a question for clarification about what Rita said, and then a comment. The question for clarification is when you talked about what your understanding of this vote is, and narrowing it to the loan, refinancing or closing out. The understanding that I gleaned is that even though that's what we're talking about, underneath that is embedded a lot of meaning through the power relationships. And therefore, although on the surface, that's the decision that we're making, underneath that is the assumption that if you voted for this, you're saying you think that those park options in that place is a good idea and we should move forward. So, question for clarification.
Are you asking me to clarify?
I'm asking the chair. Oh, okay. So, no, I think that you said about the loan, and I'm asking about the other thing. My understanding is the other thing. And I was asking the chair, because I've been told to ask the chair. It seemed like that would be the person to ask, so. And you were there when we dialogued about that motion. But my understanding is that there's more meaning embedded in that, which I kind of tried to illustrate through the example of the senior center. And what Chair Hurley thinks is that if we vote yes, that means we support the park. So if I were to vote yes, it would not mean that I supported the park. It would mean that I would support these loan terms. But that's not true in reality, though, Rita, because they can sign contracts with this vote at General Forum. This vote at General Forum is being billed as an endorsement of them to move forward on the Whitehall Regional Road Park because their power authorizes them to do so, and this was the time that General Forum got to weigh in on that. And so all of the things have to come to bear on that, even though the question is being put forth in this narrow manner.
I think a lot of people are reading a lot of things into it, but the vote is on whether to renegotiate the terms of the loan, or rather to recommend renegotiating the terms of the loan. That is the vote.
And didn't General Forum, when the project was first proposed, support the project and thus provide the authority with the authority and the funding to?
They did, and now a lot of them wouldn't, and it's because things have changed. And just like in our normal lives, say, for example, you get married to somebody and you think it's great, and, you know, throughout the years, you realize, boy, this maybe wasn't the best idea, so you change your contract and you're no longer married. Well, you know, I think that the whole dialogue has been about all of the time and all of the misrepresentations that have occurred during this period of time. The General Forum being told that everything is fine, but they did not have the money to move forward with the park. Actions being taken based on information that was at the best incomplete and at the worst inaccurate purposefully.
Excuse me.
So wait, please, I listened to you without interrupting. So
But
I
there
do
are
have the floor.
innuendos,
Please,
Mr.
you
Chair.
can wait
Point
until
of
I'm
order.
done.
Okay.
Point of order.
No, point of order
No, point of
back,
order, let's stop
Rita.
it here.
You had things that you
Laura,
talked about I didn't
Laura.
agree with.
What is your point?
The innuendo of, what is the word I'm looking for? Conspiracy that is being pitched at our staff and past boards. I am troubled by the
That's not a
tenor
point of order. You
of-
just are
Laura.
disagreeing with me.
No, she is calling a point of order, and I'm listening to that, and then I'll make a rule.
I am troubled by unsupported innuendos.
So okay, so your point of order is you're saying that we're off track here, basically, with, I mean, that.
Yes, and
And my ruling on that is we have moved off track from what we should be discussing, and we will move on.
That's fine, but I didn't make innuendo. I have the
But
documents to show
You
it.
can appeal or,
Okay, I appeal because I actually have the documents to show it. It's not an innuendo, it's a claim, and it's supported by evidence.
You've appealed, is there a second to the appeal? Then I think we'll move on from this point. I think we have the basic discussion of where we stand on the loan is the question for next week, and that's been pretty much,
I have another point on that exact thing that is not off target.
okay?
Okay, so back to if you're going to I'm going to buy a car and I'm going to get a loan. I'm going to determine the features on that car, and I talked about this with the amenities. I lost my train of thought. Oh, I recall. When the visitor center did the survey about the value that this asset would bring to our community, you know, they had some projections that were not cited with any research, but some projections nonetheless of what financially this could bring to our community. And through our dialogue about what is regional park versus what is not a regional park, I did a little bit of research, and Pam Salakongas also identified the same resource as being a valid resource, which I think is called the National Park. It's where they go each year to do the conferences, the whole park people go
Okay.
there. So they have a document, like the 2015 was the most recently published that I could find, talking about park classifications, park assets, and they do a bunch of case studies. And so they identified what a regional park is, and then they do case studies about it. They talk about the investment of it and then the return on it. Okay, so I had emailed quite some time back when we were dialoguing about what is regional versus what is not regional, 2 case studies of regional parks and the investment and what they got out of it. And the amenities of those parks are far broader and superior to this park. And so when we're deciding on whether we want to take a loan out and pay interest on a potential windfall or return on that money, we should have a grounded assessment of what that return would be. And if you compare option 1 with artificial turf to the regional parks that are identified in this study as actually being economic drivers, option 1A pales in comparison. It's just like a very, very small shadow of what these other regional assets that are actually successful are. So in terms of, again, being responsible with our taxpayers' money, I would say that because what we would be getting for it does not match the national assertion of what a regional park can bring to the area, we should not move forward with this as being considered that thing.
Okay, well, on that, I think we're going to move on to the next item.
Fair enough.
Next item on the agenda is electricity procurement and green energy credits.
So the board might recall a few meetings ago, Mr. Buckland requested some pricing on our current energy procurement contract with Constellation Energy on some renewable energy or green energy credits. Staff has obtained pricing, and it's a little bit stale, but the pricing was approximately $0.00068 per kilowatt hour through the remainder of the term of the contract that expires for a majority of our accounts in September 29th of 2018. So basically what that would amount to, if the township were interested in offsetting all of its utility purchase with green energy credits, which in this case would be, I believe, wind credits through Constellation, the cost would be approximately $446.77 for the remainder of the term in total. So if the board were interested, we'd have to get updated pricing on it, but it was requested to add this as an agenda item for discussion on that, and it's really just a matter if the board is interested in authorizing that amendment to the agreement, getting updated pricing, and we would offset 100% of the utility purchase for the township's accounts with green energy credits.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
I'd like to move that the Board of Supervisors authorize the Township Manager to execute an agreement with Constellation Energy for the acquisition of renewable energy certificates for the remainder of the contract term.
Second.
Okay, motion and second. Is there any discussion?
Yay.
Seeing none, I will call for vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Motion carries 5-0. Next is authorization to enter into an agreement with Comcast Enterprise Services for the provision of Ethernet dedicated internet to the township.
So I think that Mr. Buckland did a pretty good job characterizing the current status of the regional conversation that's taking place with the Keystone Initiative for Network-Based Education and Research, the Kimber Network, that's happening at the COG level right now. The board may recall a few months ago, or a couple of months ago anyway, the board authorized phase 2 of a study that would be conducted to determine what the cost would be to connect to the Kimber high-speed fiber network. We had some preliminary numbers on it that were roughly in the $45,000 range to connect if we did it in partnership with CATA. And I think that those numbers did not include any of what you might refer to as make-ready costs, so the permitting, the design, the actual cost to connect to the pole. Those are still costs that were to be determined in this second phase of the study, which is ongoing. In the meantime, I think we're faced with kind of a more pressing decision right now, which is what to do when this current contract expires with Comcast that we're a part of regionally, that's being kind of facilitated by Borough State College. The expiration of that contract is August 7th of this year. Needless to say, it's really not feasible at this point for the township to connect to the fiber of the Kimber network, because there would have to be a significant amount of permitting and design and actual construction and to be done in order to do that. I think Mr. Buckland alluded to a wireless option that was proposed by State College Borough, which would of course be a cost as well, which hasn't quite been fleshed out yet. There may be a partnership opportunity with CATA, which I'm under this understanding that they are proceeding with this wireless array. But there's several unknowns. So I think that the recommendation from staff is that the township proceed with its own agreement with Comcast for high-speed internet. Right now, it's our opinion, well, we've identified a substantial cost savings over what we're paying right now for really 3 times the speed that we're paying for right now. The contract that we're currently a part of, which began in 2012, included the cost of constructing the fiber and the ports in the building. So there's a lot of capital overhead that was attached to that. Now that the 5 years has passed and the agreement's about to expire, the pricing that we're getting is a lot, I think, more favorable to the township for increased service. And really right now, the demand that we have for internet speed is not being met for some of the needs that we have. More and more of our software is going to the cloud, is reliant on high bandwidth, a strong signal and strong speed that you can rely on. So, this would not preclude the township, the agreement that's provided in the agenda and that staff's recommending tonight wouldn't preclude the township from proceeding with the connection to Kimber if it were determined to be feasible and desirable at the time. The agreement is a 3-year contract, but it provides for 0 cancellation fees or penalties for early termination after 15 months. And it's our opinion, it's staff's opinion, that this would provide ample time for us to really get a good number on the Kimber cost, to appropriately budget for it in the capital improvement plan, and to make sure that there's allowable time to include it in the budget. Other municipalities have gone this way already with Comcast and that are still interested in proceeding with this Kimber study. So it doesn't put the brakes on the Kimber analysis, but it allows, I think, for some breathing room. It meets our current need, our immediate need for higher bandwidth at a lower cost. So there's a copy of the agreement that's provided with the agenda, and if the board were so interested in authorizing that agreement, it would become effective on August 7th. And after 15 months, again, no penalties for early termination. We could evaluate a different option at that time or at the expiration of that contract.
I move that the Board of Supervisors authorize the Township Manager to execute a 3-year agreement with Comcast Enterprise Services for the provision of Ethernet dedicated internet to the Township.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
So just to be clear, so after 15 months, there is no termination fee?
Correct.
All right, so, so in theory, get built over to CATA, and then we could just leapfrog, or just join up, even if they did it before we did, correct?
Sure. So CATA could pay their portion of the capital cost to connect to the actual fiber, and they've indicated that they're still very interested in proceeding that way. Their short-term solution is going to be this from my understanding, is this wireless option. And then, right, correct, the township would have a short connection over to CATA in order to get, there'd be a fee associated with the port that you need to pay for the Kimber, and then, of course, a monthly recurring cost for the internet service. but it would be a lot less expensive than having to pay the entirety of the capital cost to run fiber from the township building to where the Kimber fiber is currently located.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Laura?
Is this the contract where then the township gets some money for providing Comcast service to its residents from Comcast?
No, that's the, I believe you're thinking of the franchise agreement that the township has. There is currently, that's also coming due in the short term, or coming to the expiration of its 10-year agreement. And currently, the Center Area Cable Consortium is in the process of determining or either determining whether it's prudent to reauthorize that agreement for another 10 years. There's a 5-year extension that's provided for in the contract that may be the way that is the most advantageous to proceed. There's fees that are a part of that agreement that may need to be looked at again. So I believe there's an RFP out, and then Ms. Whitaker could probably speak to that. I believe you had a meeting, there was a consortium meeting recently, or it was in the process of being scheduled. I'm sorry, I have to look at my calendar, but nonetheless, there was an RFP that was put together by the manager of Harris Township for some legal consulting services to evaluate that agreement and make a recommendation on how best to proceed.
Okay.
That is separate from our internet service. We do get, as part of that franchise agreement, a wireless, that's where our township wireless is from. It's a separate network that's provided for at no cost to us because of that franchise.
Nice, okay.
Long answer to your question, sorry.
Thanks. I know some municipalities target then that kickback for other communications support. Like, I think the borough appropriated some of that money to support CNET, like above and beyond what they're asking for and that kind of thing. So I don't know when we would have the opportunity to dialogue about that, but just putting that out on the table. Thanks.
That would be pretty much budget.
The
Budget,
yeah.
okay,
Get the money
thanks.
back and do what we want.
Excellent,
with it.
gotcha, thank you.
Okay, any other discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? Motion carries 5-0. Do we have communications to the board? Yep. Peter?
So one set is about concerns about parking near the Naked Egg that was generated from our conversation, and well, if you do that, and then, well, then you're going to have to shut down Meckley, and if you do that, then the sort of the cascading effects, and it's very clear that both residents of that area, and I believe, and people who like to go there are like, don't mess up the Naked Egg. So that was one, and I think that everyone was copied on at least one of those. The other is that someone from the Water Authority Board approached me to talk about why water is not an essential service. And, thinking back to the zoning question that we talked about, and I have to admit, I was in a bit of a jam to answer that question, not being steeped in law, but on the face of it, just going, well, it is. But then, thinking, well, there's some ignorance of my own behind that I don't quite understand. So those are my two main ones.
Okay. Yeah, Laura?
I also received some emails about parking at the Naked Egg, and through some dialoguing with the folks that reached out to me, I kind of think that maybe some folks had the wrong idea of what we were even talking about. Like, I think that they thought that we were even thinking of removing all of the parking on Route 26. And I just wanted to clarify, when I was dialoguing about any kind of additional parking restrictions, I was talking about a total of maybe 2 spaces that would have been on Rosemont in the stream bed of Slab Cabin. I was not talking about any other place.
Yeah.
So
I think there was
a real,
I think there was some misinterpretation of our discussion, so.
Yeah, so
I
just
did,
to clarify.
In response to the emails I got, I responded, I said, we're not looking at any other restrictions besides what we've discussed, and not major, no
Awesome.
parking.
Great
So,
clarification. One more piece to add to that puzzle, I was actually having breakfast with somebody at the Naked Egg, which I greatly support and love and want to do all that I can to support. And we were waiting in line to be seated, and the owner was on the phone running around, chaos, and we overheard her saying about this car that was parked in the way of the trash, and perhaps it was going to be towed or something. And the person that I was dining with was from out of town, and indeed, it was their car that was parked in front of the trash. And I don't know if we have a requirement for this or if it would just help things move a little bit more smoothly there, but I noticed there was no parking sign in front of that trash, and there were actually parking spaces painted in front of the trash.
Is that on their property?
It's on their property.
So we have no
They have to
control
sign
over
it.
that.
Yeah, I'm not saying we have control over
I
it.
mean,
I'm
as
just
far as signs or anything.
adding to the dialogue that if the business owner were to mark that as not parkable on whatever day her trash is picked up, she could probably help that parking situation continue to be as smooth as possible and avoid any kind of towing or something. Thanks.
Okay, any other communications?
That's it.
Any calendar items? I don't think we have anything other than the COG meeting next week.
The Spring Creek Watershed Commission meets on Wednesday night at the Spring Township meeting, or Spring Township Building at 7 PM.
Okay. And I take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Again.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Vote by walking.